We also have an informed Ambassador Simeon Modiu from the European Union is also logged in. Karibu Balozi. We are pleased to have you around. We also have Amaras, the new ITC Executive Director, Pamela Cook Hamilton. I'm glad to inform you that she's Jamaican by origin and a very good friend of Africa. She's barely 2 months old in the ITC, and this is one of her first assignments, so we're really glad to have her around. We also have one of the mighty ones, her deputy, Mrs. Dorothy Tembo, who is the Deputy Executive Director in the ITC. She's from part of from Africa, so she's a friend of East Africa. We really appreciate her presence. We also have in Arusha, Tanzania, the Director, Customs and Trade, Mr. Kenneth Bagamunda, who I'm also informed has logged in. So karibu very much, Honorable Kenneth. We have Dr. Marube, who is the Chief PR for Kenya. I'm informed he's on his way, so probably we'll give him a few minutes. Yeah. Oh, karibu bana CEO. I was waiting for you. Karibu sana. I'm glad he's already here. So he's the Chief Brand Voice of Kenya, Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. So he'll give us a little bit of an insight about the same. We also have the CEO of the EABC, Dr. Peter Paduki. He is also here. Karibu Balozi. Thank you. I appreciate your presence. We have Martha Cheruto, the Deputy CEO of KEPSA. She's here on behalf representing Carol Kariuki, the CEO of KEPSA, who couldn't make it today. We really appreciate your presence. We also have Rhoda Rono, who I'm informed is also logging in from our office. She's from Kentrade, Kenya. So she'll be part of our breakout sessions, one of the key facilitators also and discussants. I really appreciate. We have Joan Mwangi, who is a key marketer from Kenya and also a leading founder of FERA. I'm informed she's logged in from West Africa. Karibu, Madam Joan. Members of the diplomatic corps, fellow colleagues at ITC in Geneva and all other UN agencies, members of the Fourth Estate, ladies and gentlemen, karibuni. I really appreciate you taking your time to be here with us today. Our session is basically structured into 4 sessions. The first session is basically 3 keynotes from our guests and the main host, who is the Cabinet Secretary for Trade, followed by a high-level session moderated by Her Excellency Dorothy Tembo from Geneva. So that will be the second session with us today. We would appreciate if you'd also stay around for this second session. And then we have the partly not final, the third session of this particular session, which is basically the themed breakout sessions for today. So kindly stay with us. That is basically where the cake of the icing of the cake on the cake is located. And then lastly, we have a small session, a brief session on adapting the call for action. So that is just a brief about today's session. Just a few housekeeping words. We are live on Twitter. Kindly follow us. We will have a question and answer session also during the moderated breakout sessions. So you can always go to your Zoom. I'm informed on the right side of the Zoom there's a feature where you can ask your questions. If you don't have this facility, please follow us on Twitter on the ITC handle, and we'll get back to you. And then you can also basically copy our hashtag #OneTradeAfrica. We'd really love to hear from you. For those present in Nairobi, we'll communicate to you in due course about, we have some small snacks you can have, because it's a end-to-end session, so you can always have some small snacks outside the lobby. I would like also to, before I finish, to introduce to you our AfCFTA coordinator at the ITC, Ms. Aissa Diallo, who will take after I finish my introduction notes. My name is Steve Machage. I am an ITC consultant on issues of regional integration and the Africa Trade Agreement. So karibuni sana. I hand over to you, Ms. Aissa in Geneva. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Steve. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. First, like my colleague Steve Machage, I would like also to thank you for having accepted to join us today for our Nairobi AfCFTA Forum. The Nairobi Forum is organized in the context of ITC's contribution to the operationalization of the AfCFTA. As you know, the AfCFTA is about creating a single market with new business opportunities in Africa for African MSMEs, women and young.
Sorry, ISO, we can't hear you. Just a minute. It seems you have muted your machine on your side. Could you please confirm?
No, unmute. Unmute. Can you hear me?
Well, I certainly hear you very loud and clear.
Thank you. So then I should continue.
We can hear you now.
Yes, okay, thank you. So I was saying that the Nairobi Forum is organized in the context of ITC's contribution to the operationalization of the AfCFTA. And the AfCFTA is about creating a new single market with new business opportunities in Africa for African MSMEs, women and young entrepreneurs. And from which angle ITC is going to support the single market? Of course, from the market access angle. And as you know, at ITC, our mission is to increase the competitiveness of MSMEs and young entrepreneurs, access more lucrative and predictable business opportunities. Therefore, we believe that we do have an important role to play in empowering MSMEs to better understand the African market requirements in terms of rules of origin, quality, marketing, packaging, and also to enable them to use ICT solutions to innovate, upgrade their business models, and trade not only traditionally, but also via e-commerce. East Africa has a strong comparative advantage using ICT solution to boost trade transactions. And the Nairobi Forum is the second forum that ITC is organizing in Africa with regional economic entities with a view to collect and share ideas on how best to empower the African business sector to leverage on the opportunities that would be presented by the AfCFTA. It's also an opportunity to highlight the main priority actions to be taken by the AfCFTA at national, regional, and continental levels to make the single market accessible for all, I mean to all. So the breakout session this afternoon and its outcome, the Nairobi call for action, will help us, ITC and our partners, working on the AfCFTA. It will help us to shape the scope of intervention of our upcoming One Trade Africa program, a program which is fully dedicated to make the new single market work for all, especially again for the African business community. So thank you very much for joining us again this morning. And please now allow me to hand over the floor to my Executive Director, Ms. Pamela Cook-Hamilton, for her allocution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aissatou. I appreciate it. And I understand I'm supposed to say Hamujambo. I think that's right. Honorable Betty C. Maina, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development of the Republic of Kenya. His Excellency, Dr. Makita Kitui, Secretary General of UNPAD. His Excellency Simon Mordu, Ambassador of the European Union to Kenya. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Let me begin by expressing my sincere thanks to the Government of Kenya for hosting these blended webinars online and in person to facilitate the participation between Nairobi and Geneva. These are part of a series of webinars co-organized with the AfCFTA Secretariat, the African Union, the African Import-Export Bank, AfrEximBank, and UNECA across the African continent. The theme of today's webinar, Trade Beyond COVID-19, is about raising the voice and level of engagement of East African MSMEs in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area. I'm delighted to be here in my capacity as Executive Director of the International Trade Center. I'm fully committed to making the AfCFTA a success for the continent, to work as one trade bloc, as a way to become more resilient to shocks, and to secure the future for coming generations. On January 21st, 2021, the AfCFTA is going to become a reality and will have a transformational effect on the lives of millions of Africans. With full implementation, the AfCFTA stands to increase intra-African exports by more than US 1.1 billion and generate over 2 million new jobs. In the meantime, we must make good use of the political momentum and steer it towards building the single market that Africans need. Indeed, AfCFTA is game-changing, but for it to work for all and meet Agenda 2063 of the African Union, we must continue to place MSMEs at the center of the policies and initiatives. They will be the engines for growth and for inclusion, helping us to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and ensure no one is left behind. At ITC, it is in our DNA to support MSMEs to become more competitive and connect to international markets. ITC is fit for purpose to support the African Union, the AfCFTA Secretariat, member states, and the MSMEs. And this will form a crucial part of our approach and strategy going forward as we develop our new organizational strategic plan 2022 to 2025. The AfCFTA will come into force at a time when MSMEs are in a more vulnerable position than ever. The effects of the COVID-19 pandemic will be felt in the short and medium term. Within Q2 of 2020, exports from Africa fell by 35% alone, and ITC calculations are showing that African exports may lose over 2.4 billion in global manufacturing value chain exports due to the shock caused by factory shutdowns in Europe, China, and the United States. According to a recent UNCTAD study, COVID-19 will drag African economies into a fall of around 2% in GDP, with smaller economies facing a contraction of up to 8%. The contraction is mainly a result of export adjustments affecting primary commodity exporters and the attendant losses to tax revenue, which reduce the capacity of government to extend public services necessary to respond to the crisis. As we have seen, Africa was impacted, but paradoxically, the fact that it is one of the least integrated regions in the world meant that it experienced the least severe effects of supply chain disruptions originating in the major markets. That should provide us with a dual lesson. One, we need to build and strengthen regional supply chains in Africa. And two, we need to invest in more value addition on the continent. But many African exporters have been hard hit by COVID and the temporary disruption of supply chain linkages, especially with the EU. One just has to look at the impact on the cut flower industry here in Kenya to see that. In that regard, the ITC has recalibrated existing initiatives to better support African producers to blunt the harshest effects of the pandemic on livelihoods. If we all recognize that it is businesses that trade, then their views and priorities must inform how the AfCFTA is rolled out. Therefore, today, the Nairobi Forum is a perfect opportunity to hear from the private sector. One, how do businesses in East Africa want to participate in the AfCFTA? What is their vision? What opportunities do they foresee? Which challenges should be addressed? And how can we better channel their views on this continental agenda to the policymakers? I hope by the end of today's discussions, we will hear more from those businesses, women and men, and have a deeper understanding of their priorities in these unprecedented times of COVID-19. The AfCFTA will help you generate more business, streamline predictable business transactions, and generate valuable employment. And for this, we need to fully align with the regional economic communities. I thank in particular the East Africa community, the East African Business Council, and the Kenya Private Sector Alliance for their engagement in today's webinar. This institutional collaboration is critical as we move forward. Finally, I'm pleased to announce that ITC is about to launch its new program, One Trade Africa, to unlock the full business potential of the AfCFTA for MSMEs. Together with Afrexim Bank, ITC is developing training programs on how to export under the AfCFTA and promote intra-African trade. We see this as our main platform for supporting you as implementation unfolds. I hope that at the end of this webinar series, throughout the different African regions, we'll be able to establish a call for action on behalf of the private sector to be a force for good in the creation of this African single market. I'd like to thank you for participating today, and I do look forward to the concrete outcomes from your interaction. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. Please now allow me to welcome the Ambassador of the European Union in Kenya, His Excellency, Mr. Simon Mordu. Excellency, you have the floor, please.
Good afternoon, Honourable Cabinet Secretary, Secretary General of UNCTAD. Let me start by taking this opportunity to thank the Ministry of Industrialisation, Trade and Enterprise Development and the International Trade Centre for organising this forum. I don't think it could have come at a better time. You know, only last year we witnessed the launch of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and we're all awaiting the start of its implementation in what is, I think, now 6 weeks' time. Now, the European Union fully supports this endeavour, and that's logical, because with 27 member states of the European Union, they form the biggest common market in the world. And I think one challenge for us is to share all of our knowledge and experience about regional economic integration, what works, what the challenges are, to help Africa and to help you make this a success. And of course, I say that knowing full well that the African reality varies from the European context. There are a number of issues that will make this process subtly different from what we went through in Europe. One is the huge size of the African continent. Your continent is 6 times the size of the European Union, and you have double the number of states participating in the free trade area, 54 compared to our 27. And this clearly will pose for you some larger challenges in regards to infrastructure and connectivity. But I think one strength you have is that you already have built up experience in regional cooperation. And I think it's these regional economic communities that Africa can build upon as you move towards your continental platform. So I do think it is very important that as we look to build the continental free trade area, that we also work simultaneously towards closer integration and collaboration in the regions and strengthen regional bodies like the East African Community, which I believe is one of the secrets that will make and help make continental cooperation a success. Now, I wanted just to perhaps share with you a few of what we have seen on the European Union side as the many advantages of a common market without tariffs and without effectively borders. So what are, just to name a few of these, the biggest benefits we've seen? First, I think probably the most important is that producers can benefit from economies of scale as their so-called domestic market becomes much, much bigger. It also allows access to cheaper raw materials and intermediate inputs and a wider variety of these. And this is particularly the case in areas like agriculture, livestock and fisheries sector, where simultaneously there will also be much wider market opportunities. I think we can also see the possibility for enhanced development of regional value chains and the potential for integration with global value chains. If you look in the European Union, the number of parts of a car that cross borders during its manufacture, or big projects like Airbus, are good examples of the development of regional value chains. I think also there's a huge opportunity to use, in a much smarter way, rules of origin to create more made in Africa goods. In other words, lower production costs and more customers for all your products and a better competitive position for African industry with regards to the rest of the world. These benefits are clearly there for larger companies, but they're also very, very, very present for small and medium-sized enterprises. If we look in Europe, around over 90% of the companies are SMEs, and around 60% of the gross domestic product of the European Union or to put it another way, 7 trillion euros is generated by small and medium-sized enterprises, and all of them in one way or another are benefiting from the common market. And I believe very strongly that African small and medium-sized enterprises will be able to contribute the same way in the future and will be the engine that will fuel economic growth and sustainable job creation on the continent. Now, the regional EU-funded East African Community Markup Programme presents an important building block to help achieve the wider continental trade integration process. We're working very closely with partners such as the International Trade Centre, and you in your turn are engaging at the regional level with SMEs both in Kenya and the rest of the East African community. You're also supporting the East African member states who are striving to address some of the regional specific sector barriers to trade in the EAC. So just to give you a couple of examples of how this project is helping to achieve this, it's helping SMEs reduce the time and cost of conducting international trade transactions through some of the support towards the establishment of a regional trade facilitation portal and developing the East African Community Quality Portal. It's helping as well the small and medium-sized enterprises to improve their packaging and optimize distribution in order to improve the consistency of, the quality of the products, and also to help them capture regional markets. We've also been doing some work to strengthen some of the business support organizations so that they can better serve SMEs and support them in trading, and also help identify new opportunities, and at the same time support some of the existing and new regional networks that help foster the exchange of good practice and lessons learned. And I also see great opportunities in particular for small and medium-sized enterprises to use digital marketplaces, which in many ways are already borderless. And quite clearly the development in e-commerce is unstoppable, but will also require investments in infrastructure, payment platforms, and access to financial means. And if I just take for a moment a look at Kenya, we have chosen together with the government of Kenya digitalization as one of our flagships for the programming of our cooperation for the next 7 years. And I hope this will allow us to also support new innovative ways of connecting suppliers and buyers in Kenya, the region, or across the continent, and also enhance our ability to use some of our development funding to leverage first very significant funding from other international financial institutions without at the same time contributing to the sovereign debt of Kenya, and also use our funding to leverage significant funding, blending private sector investment, thus creating a huge amount of funding that can create and support the creation of job opportunities, in particular for the young people. Just to flag as well that as part of our support to Kenya in response to the COVID crisis, we will be launching very soon a new facility with the European Investment Bank that will provide easier access to finance for SMEs to an amount of 20 billion shilling to help support their recovery from the COVID crisis. And this is something that I'm very grateful to Cabinet Secretary Minor, to her and her team for their inputs in the design of this. Ladies and gentlemen, although the COVID crisis has had a major impact on the African and Kenyan economy, it's also created many new challenges. I'm convinced that the momentum that has already been shown by all African nations in the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area will be a big boost for the economy in the years to come. SMEs will have a hugely important role in this, and therefore I'd like to end by calling upon all of you from private sector who are attending this conference not to hesitate to seize some of the opportunities that this African Continental Free Trade Area presents. It will be up to you to reap the benefits that these developments can bring, because frankly, governments and public administrations such as the European Union and the East African Community, we can only help create an environment to do business, but it will be ultimately up to you, the private sector, to come with innovative ideas and plans that can make use of all of these opportunities. I wish you the best of success and want to end by assuring you that the European Union will be there to support, encourage, and partner with you along the way and the entirety of the journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your statements. Now, please allow me to give the floor to the Secretary General of UNCTAD, Dr. Mikusak Kitui. Dr. Kitui.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the European Union to Kenya, my all-time friend and the head of East African Business Council, Dr. Peter Mathuki, Dr. Wilfred Marube of the Investment Promotion and Branding Kenya Parastatal, Excellencies, participants, colleagues from UNCTAD and ITC joining us from Geneva. I know the weather and the clinical challenges you are facing, but from the warmth of Nairobi, I want to tell you a bon courage and welcome to this webinar. I am glad to have a chance to reaffirm our commitment as an organization in our partnership with the ITC and other friends set out a few things that I see as objective challenges around which you have to graft new thinking on how to strengthen small and medium enterprises. This afternoon, I'll be launching a very ambitious and comprehensive study that we've been doing over the past 3 months across our divisions at UNCTAD on the COVID economy. And I can share with you some of the details that we've already got in this report. Africa, in the second quarter of 2020, saw a decline of imports by 25% and its exports by 35%. This, in addition to a first half year decline of foreign direct investment into the continent of 28%. Some of the most affected areas of Africa's economy, of course, are the services industry, particularly transport and hospitality services, which have seen a massive hit since the start of the COVID, between 75 and 80%. And as is well known to many of you, the largest concentration of small enterprise roles in the hospitality industry is a dominant domicile of women entrepreneurs. So the sector where they are most represented has received the most significant hit because of the COVID. And that means that if we're looking for solutions to recovery of economies of small enterprises, we must put on gender lenses about how to shore up the opportunities of the women who have been most vulnerable to the disruptions of the services sector. There's a second phenomenon, which is a pre-existing condition before COVID hit us. Already global patterns of global value chains, production networks, service networks was going under very dramatic transformation before the arrival of the pandemic. Just like trade and investment was sluggish, virtually at zero growth in net terms since the financial crisis at the start of the decade, so also have we seen some significant shifts in global value chains. Most important, the shortening of supply networks with production closer to the market. Regionalization, closer regional relocations and localization in domestic territories, partly because of the enabling technology, partly because of rise in economic nationalism in major economic powers. And what does that mean is a disruption for small African enterprises that found a niche on global supply networks. as the production is reshored or brought closer to the destination consumer markets, the distant niches that African enterprise had weaved in global value chains have been among the casualties of this transformation. Secondly, because of technology particularly, we are seeing the shift from tangibles to intangibles as a main destination of investment resources by multinational enterprises. And with this also, the new mentality, particularly in the COVID period, shifting from the emphasis on just-in-time efficiency to more just-in-case resilience, more flexibility, and more responsiveness to sustainability considerations. In these circumstances, how do we insinuate the role of the Continental Free Trade Area? To my mind, if Africa did not have an AfCFTA, a Continental Free Trade Area, the challenges of today will have forced it to create one. As it were, it's a godsend that the basic foundation work for the CFTA had been done before the pandemic. But the pandemic has just added more reason why Africa needs its CFTA, for a number of reasons. Number one, although Africa is the region with the least internal trade, intra-African trade compared to other regions of the world, African intelligence is alive to two facts. Number one, that up to 40% of goods traded between African countries represent value-added products. And that means that intra-African trade creates more value and spurs more industrialization and has more consumers and beneficiaries than Africa's trade with the rest of the world. And number two, a realization that there is no region of the world, there's no model of development where countries have traded to be success stories without learning to trade with their neighbors. And these considerations are compounding the reality that the rest of the world is looking local. Africa has no choice but to also start looking local. And that means we have to model the best way of fast-tracking beyond the political goodwill, the actual fiscal expansion of Africa's internal trade. A number of things remain important. As we move towards actualizing the protocols already signed, it's extremely important that we start implementing a simple, transparent, effective, and predictable rules of origin regime, which allows for smaller enterprises to overcome the often realized non-tariff barriers to trade. As we know from the East African region, one of the main aspects of regional integration has often been unwritten rules. One of the most common unwritten rules which impede trade is feigning ignorance. Oh, you were saying it's also provided for. We did not know. The pretensions of ignorance is one of the impediments for smooth movement of goods and services. And learning from the experience of regions like this, Africa can now say, can we model the CFTA with a clear, enforceable, and transparent rules of origin regime, which allows faster movement of goods between countries and services. So similarly, African political leaders have to be pushed to live their promise, to demonstrate that made in Africa has priority over imports from third parties in African markets. There's no point where we can have all beautiful rules and celebrate a continental integration when merchandise coming from East Asia has a price advantage over merchandise coming from within Africa, in African territory. This is the bane of Africa's integration in the past, and it's one of the challenges that have to be overcome. Similarly, we must start demonstrating already in enterprise areas like tea, cacao, beverages, cement, fertilizer, areas which have already had the experience and growing potential of cross-border integration as the building blocks to demonstrate the CFTA is working. But to do this, we must deal with another challenge. there has to start developing a continent-wide comprehensive competition policy and consumer protection policy. We at UNCTAD are happy that the phase 2 negotiations on competition, investment, and intellectual property rights, which have been disrupted recently because of COVID, pay sufficient attention to the importance of a protocol on competition. Unless you have a clear policy across the borders on competition, you are going to see the distortionary practices, which we have already started seeing in fertilizer and cement particularly, and beverages, squash the dreams and the hopes of enterprise. And the main casualty when the bigger enterprises are abusing competition law is this vulnerability of smaller enterprises. Finally, I want to share our sense that Africa, in looking to recover better and drive the renewal of small and medium enterprises, has to pay more attention to illicit financial flows. Our recent publication this year, the Economic Development in Africa Report 2020, demonstrates that Africa loses close to $90 billion every year in illicit financial flows, often through misinvoicing, tax avoidance behavior, and other illicit financial flows. This amount of money is already nearly 50% of Africa's missing financing for SDG goals. And if you cannot start looking at how the world can be in solidarity with Africa, looking for fresh resources, particularly at a time of scarcity like recovering from COVID, when you are doing little in stemming the flow of what is already owned by the continent. Finally, I just wish to mention that while this continent, Africa, has been holding its breath about rising economic nationalism, particularly in major trading powers, we should look at this not as a short-term phenomenon, but a long-term phenomenon. If you look at the politics of the US, traditionally the Republican Party has been the party of free trade. It's just an anomaly that they're ones who drove this first phase of economic nationalism. But now, as President Biden comes into office, we have to face the reality that the Democrats have been more traditionally economic nationalists than Republicans. So we should look in the medium and longer term that there is no alternative to paying added political and actual investment attention to unlocking the potential of a continental free trade area. Particularly, we're looking how to enable small and medium enterprises reap the benefits and the promise of prosperity that come with it. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Dr. Aro, we enjoyed your remarks. Now we will move to the next session, which is the high-level session. This will be a panel moderated by the Deputy Executive Secretary. I want to relay my apologies from the Minister of Industrialization and Trade, Kenya, Honorable Betty Maina. She isn't able to make it at the moment. We'll try to see if we can link her. She'll join us maybe in the course of the day, if possible. Back to Geneva. As they prepare to give us the link from Geneva, I would like to introduce the the panelists for the high-level session. The moderator will be Ms. Dorothy Tembo, who is the Deputy Executive Secretary of ITC. Karibu, Madam Tembo. We also have Mr. Kenneth Baramenta logging in from Arusha. He's the Director of Customs and Trade. He was very instrumental in the setting up of the tripartite agreement for the EAC, SADC, and the COMESA region, and also the AfCFTA agreement. We also have on panel Dr. Marube, who is the CEO for the Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. Karibu kabisa. You joined us. I didn't introduce you properly. Karibu, I appreciate. We have Honorable Dr. Peter Mathuki from the East African Business Council. He's a trade specialist himself, and he has also been a former member of the East African Legislative Assembly. Karibu sana. We also have Joanne Mangi, who is a marketeer. She's logging in from Ghana. I hope you are listening to us and you'll be able to join us. Joan, karibu sana. Please make your presence known. I can see you're logged in. We also have on stage Martha Chiruto. Karibu sana. I didn't have the opportunity to introduce you. We appreciate you representing the CEO. Back to you, Madam Dorothy from Geneva. Karibu.
Asante sana. A very warm welcome to you all to the second segment of our program this morning. And I want to join my executive director in thanking the government of Kenya for hosting us this morning. I think the opening session this morning also provided an excellent context to our panel discussion for this afternoon. One thing that we are all agreed on is that the African Continental Free Trade Area provides huge potential and opportunities for Africa. This would definitely be a major contributor to making, or to us achieving that transformative objective that we have for Africa. And I think Secretary General Kitui dwelt a lot on this, as did my executive director. And this is all all steps that are moving towards ensuring that we attain the 2063 agenda. Africa has a lot of gains. And this morning, this afternoon, again, in the opening remarks, you did hear the figures in relation to what some of those gains would be with respect to Africa. Specific to East Africa, I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that UNECA estimates the benefits to be somewhere around 1.8 billion, with the potential of also creating 2 million jobs if the African Continental Free Trade Area is successfully implemented. The last few years, as we know, have been very hectic and have seen African leaders at the highest level, and indeed as part of that engagement, senior government officials working tirelessly to make the African Continental Free Trade Area a reality. And where we stand now is that much of that foundation is already in place. But we know all this will come to nothing unless the reality of ensuring that trade actually happens, and that this can only be so when we ensure that private sector can be able to do business, so that we are not only creating that enabling environment, but also working with private sector to ensure that they are not only able to produce, but they are also able to actually trade within, or indeed, more importantly, amongst Africa, but the objective should be to go beyond Africa itself. It therefore demands that private sector not only made aware of the arrangement, but more importantly is that we hear directly from them where they see opportunities and what needs to be addressed to making this become a reality. And this is precisely the focus of this afternoon's high-level session. And with me, I have a very distinguished panel to share their views with us. Join me in welcoming we have just been informed that the Honorable Cabinet Secretary is likely to join us a little bit later in the discussion. If that happens, I will take the opportunity to introduce her again. But I still have a very good panel that's before us this morning. We have the EAC Director General Customs and Trade, Mr. Kenneth Baba Muhuda, a dear friend, a true champion of regional integration in the context of EAC and beyond. He also, as you heard earlier on, has been very instrumental in the tripartite efforts. The role of trade promotion institutions in ensuring a successful, sustainable implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area cannot be but emphasized. And joining us today, as you heard again, is Dr. Wilfred Marube, CEO of Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. A big part of the African Continental Free Trade Area is about ensuring that trade and transactions do happen, and no better representatives can we have than the private sector themselves. You have again been introduced to Dr. Peter Matuki, CEO of East African Business Council, and indeed you have also been introduced to Ms. Joanne Mwangi, and here I wanted to emphasize the need for us to ensure that no one is left behind. And that's precisely part of the role that Ms. Mwangi, founder and chair of the Federation of Women Entrepreneurs Association and chief executive of the Professional Marketing Services is all about. Through the provision of the capacity building, entrepreneurship and business development training, to name but a few, this is precisely what they are targeting, to make sure that women are becoming very much an integral part of everything that we do, but more specifically in the context of the CFTA, that they are indeed given the opportunity to be able to produce and be very much in a position that they too can export, because we have proved beyond reasonable doubt that when women are given the opportunity, the benefits have a lot of spillover effects. And finally, but not least, is Ms. Martha Chiruto, who's, as you heard, is the Deputy CEO at Kenya Private Sector. So perhaps before I get into the discussion, I would like to take you through some housekeeping arrangements. We will have the initial remarks being made through the questions that I will pose to the different panelists, but beyond that, we will also, time permitting, have a question and answer session. And here I would like to ask all the participants, those that would like to put forward some questions, that you do this through the chat. And we will pick up a few of those questions, but not to despair if we do not get through the full range of questions, because the remainder of the questions will be responded to as part of the upcoming discussions today. And indeed, if we still don't manage to get through that we will ensure that those coordinating the event today in liaison with the panelists will still come back with some responses later. I will encourage my panelists to keep time so that we have that opportunity to interact. And my first question will now go to Director General Kenneth Babamuhuda. We have just been told, and we all know, that the African Continental Free Trade Area becomes operational as of 1st January next year. And it is one that is likely to bring a lot of opportunities, again, as we heard, but it is also the reality that we do have some people that are still a bit skeptical about what will come out of this process. In particular, we have had some governments expressing concerns around the potential customs revenue loss, and alongside that, some of the micro, small, and medium enterprises have also expressed concern that such a deficit would ultimately be one perhaps that results in additional taxation coming through this process. What would you be able to share with us, or how would you respond to this situation?
Thank you, Dorothy, and thank you, the organizers of this webinar, for inviting me to participate. It really gives me the honor and pleasure to be part of this discussion, particularly when we're talking about MSMEs and the African Continental Free Trade Area. One is we need to contextualize the issue of revenue loss and the impact it will have on the MSMEs. One, we need to look at the long-term benefits of the African continental free trade area vis-a-vis the short-term challenges that we are likely to encounter as we deepen our integration on the trade dimension. The second one that we need to put into context, we need to look at what is the role of the MSMEs within the African continental free trade area framework in terms of what contribution do they make, and in terms of what role are they going to play in ensuring that the African continental free trade area becomes a success. Then we need also to look at what Dr. Tui had also touched on, the level of intra-African trade vis-a-vis the total trade. Now, when you look at these components, then you would be able to know whether the concerns are real or not. Definitely from the experience of even other RECs, the fears of revenue loss has always been there. Even at the ESC, we had that fear when we were negotiating the customs union protocol, that customs revenues would reduce. But to the contrary, we didn't experience those. Actually, there had been a proposal that we put in place, a compensatory fund for purposes of compensating those partner states that would get revenue reduction. But that didn't happen. And of course, the compensation fund, we didn't do it. And from our projections and simulations, it indicated that instead you get an increase in revenue. And that's what we have been experiencing in the EAC. So I think when you look at the long-term benefits, the multiplier effect in the context of MSMEs, you see that once trade flourishes and increases, then it will be able to encourage, actually enhance the level of activity and growth of these enterprises. And definitely more revenue would come in form of the domestic taxes that still will remain applicable to trade within the continent. Secondly, the issue of value chain positioning of SMEs within the regional and continental context should be a catalyst for enhanced revenues that will come as a result of small and medium enterprises investments within the region, and also linking them up with the big players, the big enterprises. And when you look at Africa currently, you find that the bigger part of MSMEs are actually the informal sector, which is outside the tax bracket. So now bringing them within the tax bracket, formalizing them, would encourage even contribution to the public revenues, the public finance of the countries involved in the free trade, in the continental free trade area. Then when you look at the structure of our trade, already many traders, many enterprises are trading within the existing preferential trade regimes under the RECs. There is really the highest concentration of trade is within the RECs, where there is already preferential treatment. Therefore, there is no revenue being collected from this trade. If you look at inter-REC trade between different RECs across, the level of trade is lower than the intra-REC trade in terms of when you're looking at the African trade spectrum. Therefore, the effect of revenue in that regard would not be significant, given that there is already trade going on within that context. And the existing preferential trade arrangements, particularly if you look even at the overlapping nature, then gives it even a wider net in regard to the application of preferential trade. And I think the continental free trade area is not going to reinvent the wheel. We are going to build on the existing preferential and free trade arrangements for purposes of expanding it to the whole continent. And therefore, the effect of revenue, of customs revenue, should not be a big concern, and as far as the continental free trade area is concerned. And I don't see member states or passing on taxation to the MSMEs, given the priority that we are trying to focus on them for purposes of enhancing economic growth and development on the continent. I think that's what I can give for the time being, Dorothy.
Thank you very much. Listening to you, have a longer term approach to what we are doing, because the benefits might not come immediately, but we should be looking more at what, you know, the multiplier effects would be down the line. And picking on that, I wanted to come to the next question. I was quite happy that you made reference to the fact that you are drawing some of your experiences from what has happened within the context of the EAC. But beyond that, you have also been doing the work in the context of the tripartite free trade area. And I wanted to specifically ask, other than what you have given us, are there any other specific lessons that we can draw from this process, these two processes that I've referred to, which we perhaps should be paying attention to going forward and trying to address those perhaps in the context of the current engagement at the continent?
Thank you, Dorothy. First of all, I am very happy on the ongoing reforms at the AU, particularly concerning the division of labor between REX and the continental, the African Union and other agencies. And I think it is a realization which even emanates from the Abuja Treaty, that REX have a big, the building blocks for the continental integration. When you look at the TFTA, which we have been involved in between COMESA, EAC, and SADC, you note that one, it comprises nearly half of the continent in terms of size, land size, in terms of GDP, in terms of population. And therefore, it is a critical component of the continental free trade area. And for us who were involved in, still believe that it is a low-hanging fruit that we can utilize to drive the continental integration. The level of trade within those three RECs has been quite higher than the continental average, the intra-trade there. And I think we can leverage on what is taking place within the TFTA for purposes of jump-starting the CFTA. From the outset, even in the negotiations, you'll find a lot of similarities of what the CFTA has come up with vis-a-vis what the TFTA had done. Actually, there is a school of thought that the CFTA has built on the TFTA in terms of the legal text, the content, the institutional framework for negotiation, the structure of the instruments, even the annexes, the negotiators themselves who were from the TFTA are the same that we used in the CFTA. So it is part, and it's an integral component of the continental framework. And we need to leverage and utilize the existing preferential arrangements in place for purposes of moving forward. For example, the East African community has already concluded tariff negotiations with SACU within the context of the TFTA. And therefore, we shouldn't go and reinvent the wheel and restart a renegotiation on that perspective. We should utilize the existing framework that we have already undertaken under the TFTA. And also, there are quite a lot of new, initiatives that has taken place. For example, the non-tariff barrier online reporting platform, the interconnectivity we are doing, the one-stop border posts within the framework, the movement of business persons. I think these are already areas that we can utilize under the CFTA, draw lessons from, and even customize to roll them out at the continental level. Fortunately, even the Secretary General of the CFTA was a very proactive and active member of the TFTA negotiations, and I believe that we will take that opportunity to utilize the existing frameworks that we have developed. And to the MSMEs, I think priority in COMESA, SADC, and EAC has been placed on that. We have developed trade regimes, simplified trade regimes, which we can make a hybrid within the framework of TFTA and utilize them under the CFTA. We have done cross-border trade facilitation interventions. I've already mentioned about the one-stop border posts, how they have facilitated trade. We are building border markets, and we are also have initiatives on interconnectivity of customs systems. We are looking at issues relating to standards and the SPS under the TFTA. The same arrangement could be replicated at the CFTA so that we do not, we optimize the resources and also utilize the existing initiatives that are already in place. So I think there is a lot to pick from the TFTA. Countries are already, the ratifications are going on. I understand soon we will have another ratification which is nearly finalized from Zambia. And this will be moving towards getting the ratifications that are required, the threshold, so that the TFTA can also become an impetus, a driver of the continental integration initiatives and the implementation of the CFTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't reinvent the wheel, and build on or consolidate what is working well is the summary of what you say. With that, I would like to move to Dr. Marube. And here, I think I said in my introductory remarks that the role of trade promotion officers is going to be very critical in the context of supporting the private sector in relation to the services that you provide. But in so doing, that what we are really trying to do there is ensuring that we are entrenching this capacity building in a way that provides sustainability to what we are doing. Clear plans coming out of the discussions that the African governments have had in relation to accelerating intra-African trade and boosting the trading position in the context of the global market. And yes, the African Continental Free Trade Area membership has agreed to align themselves with the Buy Africa, Build Africa initiative, which is part of the strategy to really achieve that objective. My question to you, Dr. Marube, is Kenya putting in place a very specific initiative that aligns with itself with this Buy Africa, Build Africa? In essence, it would be Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative. If you do have these steps being taken, very grateful if you could share with us in 3 minutes what it is that you are doing. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dorothy, for that question. As Kenya, through the Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency, we are cognizant of the Buy Africa, Build Africa initiative, and more locally, so to speak, the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative, which was established in 2017 as a national agenda, national policy agenda, and strategy initiative. And we are cognizant that as Kenya, so to speak, that probably we are consuming more of what is coming from outside, what we're importing, than actually what should be produced locally. So from that point of view, we're looking at the goal and we're asking ourselves the question, why is it that we are not consuming as much as we ought to what we're producing locally? So as a way of confronting that is to acknowledge the fact that as a country, we are a home of high quality products, manufactured products. So to start with, that because of our mindset, if we may say just basically because of our mindset and some of our attitudes, we do believe that some of the products and maybe services that are imported are more superior than the local produced. So that probably is the main driving reason. And as an agency and as a country, we are focused on shifting and interrogating that mindset for us to appreciate that indeed we have high quality products. They are products that can be able to meet the demands, not only just local standards, but international standards, because we believe that it's only through local consumption and preference for local products that we even be able to grow our exports. Because if we're able to buy Kenya and build Kenya, that means by essence, also the same message is shared with Kenyans in the diaspora and even for the other external market. We see the benefits of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative as spurring economic growth in Kenya and in line with the national agenda that is of the Big Four agenda that is within the manufacturing sector. So that is something that we're in line with. And we're working on a campaign at the moment, which will be able to share details at the right time in terms of confronting. Number one is confronting the mindset. That's just not about patriotism. It's just not about buying Kenya. It's about buying quality. And this quality can be gotten within Kenya. And also being able to create the connection that by buying Kenya, build Kenya, you are basically driving industrialization. You are leading to the growth of the micro and small enterprises, who's basically providing an opportunity for them to be able to produce those goods and services that are consumed locally, and which is in line with actually even our national policy and strategy of Vision 2030. So that's very big for us. And it's something that we believe as a country that is going to spur economic growth, not just economic growth locally through consumption, but also leading to exportable products, because it's only just by producing what is within locally that meets the high standards among the citizens that can be able to export, and also triggering the value addition on some of those products, and also investments, that is foreign direct investment by Kenya, build Kenya, because that means from that point of view, the investment opportunities that may arise because of the rising demand. Because as a country in Kenya, we realize that we have a youthful population. We have a good size of middle class who are basically able to consume the goods. So for us, this is a big opportunity in terms of growing our exports and also in terms of growing our local economy. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Following up on the issues that you raised, I think very clear in terms of the steps that you're taking at the national level. I wanted to find out from you, working with others in the region, what some of the specific steps that are being taken to support micro, small, and medium enterprises with respect to their alignment with the Buy Africa, Build Africa.
Okay. Thank you for that. And as part of a government institution and in line with our mandate as a national export promotion agency, we're working with other agencies. We have the media, we have MSEA, that is the Micro and Small Enterprise Authority of Kenya, whose basically role is to ensure that the medium and small enterprises are facilitated in terms of capacity building and in terms of funding, so that they're able to effectively participate in the export sector and also within this initiative. We also realize that most of the micro and small enterprises have challenges in market access, have challenges in business intelligence, in getting information on exports. They also have challenges in funding and maybe skills. So as an agency, we have what we call a product development program. As we speak today, I think for the last 3 days, we have been engaging with most of these medium and small enterprises in building their capacity to produce products that meet the local market's demands first. And then from there, then they'll be able to access the export markets. So that's something we are working on, and we're not doing it alone. We are working with other agencies like the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KEPSA here. We're working also within the other horticulture sector, that is the Kenya Flower Council, and other within the horticulture sector. But one of the issues that we would say that probably would be a game changer is that at the moment we are working together with CAM and the Kenya Fashion Council and the textile sector, with that's on the medium and small enterprises, to come up with a campaign within on Buy Kenya, Build Kenya within the textile industry. So that's a campaign we are working, which is multi-organizational with the export sector players. So we have finalized on that particular short-term campaign together with the support of our State Department of Industrialization, but focusing on the textile sector. And the main players we are focusing on are the medium and small enterprises who require our support. That is the fashion designers, the textile producers, and then of course some of the tailors. So these are some of the initiatives we have undertaken as an agency, because we realize that our job is basically facilitative. We do not have any products or services, as we popularly say, but our job is to ensure that the medium and micro small enterprises are basically supported, and we are connecting them with other agencies whose mandates is to provide funding, and some of them is for policy support, and also incubating some of those within some of the institutions that we're talking about. And as I may want to say is that some of the challenges which the micro and small enterprises are getting are standardization. So, and we appreciate that within the country, we have bodies like Kenya Bureau of Standards, who we have also brought on board together with KILDI, that's an industrialization body, to help these MSMEs come up with products that meet standards and which makes them much more acceptable within the market. And within also the mandate of our institution as an export promotion agency, we're not just looking at the local consumption. At the end of the day, we're asking ourselves, let's produce much more high quality for local consumption so that you can make them even more attractive for also export orientation. So for us, that's what you're doing as an agency together with others.
Thank you very much, and a very neat way to get into the next line of discussion that we will have. I think what I'm hearing from you is that you have moved forward to ensure that not only are the enterprises being supported on the production side, but making sure that the quality and standard side of issues is really one that is being addressed. And here we are, we have a lot of effort being applied in that direction. But we also know that there are many other aspects that have affected trade, in particular issues relating to what Secretary General referred.
Attends, je dis à Didi. Didi, you are mute. You are mute.
I do apologize. I was saying that there is a lot of effort that has been made. Let me take my cursor off because it automatically mutes me. I was saying that a lot has been done in relation to preparing private sector to produce quality that also meets the standards, and standards in this case are the international standards. But a lot of what is now happening is also huge demand in relation to meeting voluntary standards. And this is an aspect that we have seen growing on our side. So the area of ensuring that we not only address this, but address the broader non-tariff barriers that affect businesses is one that remains a priority. And here I wanted to turn to you, Dr. Matuki, and ask that, through the East African Business Council, a lot of progress has been achieved regarding the reduction of non-tariff barriers in East Africa. How would you see, from your experience, how NTBs would be addressed in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Thank you, Dorothy. And I was appreciating my colleagues, panelists who are with us. I appreciate the query that you are asking on non-tariff barriers. But let me start by saying that the excitement within the private sector in the region is Africa is about to become, become the world's largest free trade area. And that is an excitement. And that is why East African Business Council, we are mobilizing private sector in the region to participate in the conversation around AfCFTA. And we think this is important. And indeed, we have been doing that, working closely with governments to ensure that private sector is aware of what is happening. And therefore, ultimately, we look forward to a borderless Africa, because that way, that will grow businesses in our continent and within our regional economic blocks. And that is why East African Business Council, with other regional economic, business councils in Africa, we have agreed to form African Business Council. And the idea is to make sure that we have a structured way of engaging with the public sector and governments in dealing with issues that affect business. Therefore, that being the case, we feel that it's important to deal with the issues around non-tariff barriers. And especially as Bagamoda said, out of the experience, now we have seen within the East African community, non-tariff barriers, if they are not properly now checked, they can actually frustrate a big agenda like the African free trade area. And that's why it's important that we are in it right from the beginning as a private sector, aware, of course, that Africa, intra-trade Africa, still standing below 15%, 12% compared to other regions. Asia at around 47%, Asia, North America at about 50, Europe at around 69. And therefore now is a challenge to us as Africa. How do we get out of this? Is to embrace AfCFTA. And therefore, non-tariff barriers, of course, look at Annex 5 of the Protocol on Trading Goods, addresses specifically non-tariff barriers. And that is an excitement. And we are saying it's important that we start dealing with, and this will call for an engagement, close collaboration between the public and private sector, continuous engagement and dialogue to make sure that, of course, the laws that exist and are not are reviewed or checked to ensure that trade barriers, non-tariff barriers are not there anymore. And therefore, we feel it's important now to put in place some mechanisms that will look into these non-tariff barriers to avoid these frustrations. And one of them is, of course, the online mechanisms, so that at any particular point where private sector we are facing this, we can be able to report instantly, engage with government and say, we have non-tariff barriers in this particular area. Of course, again, we could have even offline, mechanisms where we could report and say, this is where they are, and work closely with the regional economic blocks monitoring systems and systems that are in place to deal with the non-tariff barriers. So I think it's important that than any other time before, cooperation must be there, must exist, particularly between the regional economic blocks, NTB, monitoring mechanisms. We use, again, harmonization of regulations, because we have seen out of the experience, we have seen in the existing regional economic blocks. If again, we don't harmonize regulations, again, there'll be issues emerging from different partner states. And therefore it's important that we harmonize. Again, information sharing. What is it that we are facing from one regional economic block and the other? So it's important that we put in place mechanisms that would share information. And this information is used effectively to reduce non-tariff barriers. Instituting trade remedies committees. And this is something that I think it's important. I know we are yet to achieve this within the East African community, but it's important that these committees are institutionalized within AfCFTA framework, and therefore important that they are activated from other regional economic blocks so that we can continue engaging. And this again will be used to resolve some of the disputes that may arise from different partner states. So I think it's important that we give prominence to checking, continuously checking how we need to resolve these non-tariff barriers. Otherwise we end up frustrating a big idea that is AfCFTA. And I think that is a game changer for us in Africa. In fact, prophetically, when it was being launched in 2016, we didn't know 3 years later, pandemic like COVID will come in. And we have seen also COVID-related NTBs. And that's what we are saying, we need to work together so that again, we don't take advantage of a pandemic to even put in more non-tariff barriers, and more importantly, to work together to resolve. And finally, as partner states within Africa, we need to even start putting in place mechanism to prepare for pandemics like this one. No one was expecting pandemic. And this one has really put both, of course, lives and business into a serious trouble. So it's important we prepare for some of these things. And in the event they come, how do we together have a harmonized way of resolving these things so that ultimately we can increase Africa intra-trade from the current 12%, possibly to something above 40% in the next 5 years if we work together. And therefore, important collaboration between private sector and public sector is key to ensure this. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I couldn't agree with you more on the need to ensure that there is proper coordination in relation to management of pandemic situations such as the ones that we have. From the work that we have undertaken, we have over 100+ measures that have been put in place coming from a good intent to try and ensure that we preserve life. But at the same time, these are measures that are now hindering trade. So this is, I believe, part of what you are raising. And I wanted to follow very quickly on that particular aspect. Having been a member of the East African Legislative Assembly, what if I were to ask 1 or 2 issues that you would want to propose that need to be addressed at that level, whether at the national or indeed at the regional level? What would be your response?
Thank you very much. I think this is important. And I said from the beginning, right from the word go, we need to have all stakeholders involved in this process. So the principle of inclusivity, even having our legislators involved in this, because again, for AfCFTA to succeed, we would want some regulations reviewed at the national and at the regional level. And therefore, as Secretary General Onekt had said from the beginning, we need to deal with the rules of origin right from the beginning. To me, this is very important. And therefore, the export and import regulations to address the rules of origin, to me, is a priority. So that at some point, we could even start taking advantage and having products labeled made in Africa, because I think that is very important. And learning from the pandemics that we are facing now, we are learning a lot that we need to start not relying too much on what is coming outside the continent, but take advantage of our strength, a comparative advantage within the continent. And therefore the regulations that oscillate around the export and import regulations need to be addressed so that we don't, there's some things that we must not do because we must avoid the blanket, import restrictions, for example, goods coming from one country to another, avoid the ad hoc export restrictions because of COVID and stuff like that. So I think the regulatory framework needs to be checked so that it aims at promoting ultimately the intra-Africa trade, which is our focus, and that is our excitement as private sector in Africa and in East Africa, because we see this as a huge opportunity to grow our own continent.
Thank you very much. Providing more predictability to rules and regulations so that business are very much aware of what this process demands and they're fully prepared for that. I liked the principle of inclusivity that you brought in, which again fits into the next discussions very, very neatly. I think you were talking from a perspective of institutional inclusivity. I wanted to shift this slightly to talk about inclusion from a perspective of ensuring that no one is left behind. Women being very much an integral part of the process and being very much engaged in trade. Where we are, it is very clear that their participation due to various reasons has been very, very limited. And I wanted to turn to you, Ms. Mwangi, and find out from you as a leading marketeer in East Africa, how we can use the continental free trade area to reduce the gender disparities within the region, and indeed through doing that, that we are also able to increase the ownership of women-owned enterprises in the region.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here, and I want to thank and congratulate the organizers, the government of Kenya as well. And particularly, I want to thank you, Madam Tembo, for really moderating very finely and smoothly. I'm enjoying it very, very much. I speak from a position of being an entrepreneur. So when people are talking, they're talking about micro small enterprise authority or micro small enterprises or micro small interventions. I am that micro and small. That's what I represent. And so I would want to speak particularly for women entrepreneurs who are the people who are the members of the Federation of Women Entrepreneur Associations, which is an umbrella body into which any other association of women in business can plug in so that we speak with a bigger voice. Now, you've asked me how AfCFTA can limit gender disparities within the region and increase the ownership of enterprises across the region. And this is an area of particular interest to me. One of the things is that I feel strongly that we need to align AfCFTA's provisions to existing national development strategies. This is so that whatever is happening already, we don't stop and start something new, but we kind of segue into the next. So whatever is being done right now within our region and within Kenya for women in business, let it not stop, but instead be expanded so that it fits in within the African free trade area reality. The other area that I feel very strongly is really enabling trade policies that promote regional trade and give an advantage to African nations. I have had the opportunity to sit as the chair of the FEMCOM, COMESA Women in Business. And in the 22 countries that we were in, very little trade is happening inter-country. And until we get to understand what the information or the realities on the data on the ground, what is available that can be traded from where, we will not make much headway. So that access to information so that everybody has got the intelligence and the data to actually take up those opportunities. Women are time poor, so interventions that actually reach them have to be tailor-made with a gender lens for women, as opposed to making decisions and then assuming that women will fit into it. One of the other areas we find is that we need to really segment the industries in which women thrive, because in as much as we want women to expand to new areas and more innovations, we have to work with where we are and grow to where we wish to go. So if we look at the businesses where women are thriving, we're talking of agribusiness, we're talking of the service sector, we're talking of hospitality, we're talking of the industrial sector, value addition, particularly of in the craft sector. What are we going to do in that area so that we're able to grow the scale and the scope of business for women already there? Then that becomes the pathway for the next generation. One of the key area that is really a block for women's entrepreneurship development is access. After we've had access to information and knowledge, is access to finance. And I think with access to finance, it is without a doubt an area that calls for collaborative effort, for cooperation, and for building scale. Women alone, nobody can move alone. So working through organizations, associations, networks, chamas, whatever you choose to call them, but bringing women together so that they're speaking as groups and therefore can access significant funding and can produce significant volumes to trade. You cannot say you're exporting before you can even achieve the goals or the requirements of the market in which you exist. I also believe very strongly that procedural obstacles that tackle gender-specific barriers, such as harmonizing regulations. We've worked for a long time in this space, and you find that the things that prevent women from traveling from one country to the other, for example, or moving goods, have nothing to do with tariffs a lot of the time, but with non-tariff barriers. And we need to address these non-tariff barriers, such as social cultural norms that will affect women and will make them not trade in the region. And I would say finally, regardless of what policies are put in place, the implementers are the private sector. So it is getting the private sector to come on board and ensure that they understand what these opportunities are. This means there has to be a very concerted communication campaign that speaks with one voice as to the benefits of us trading across Africa, across East Africa, across whichever region before we even think of going out. The market is big. It's getting even bigger come 1st of January 2021. And I think we really need to work for civil society and for private sector to ensure that this is done. And we need to make sure for us as organization in the women's space, we are working to make sure that no woman is left behind by ensuring that first and foremost, the information is shared, and then the access to the markets is shared. And finally, that we create the confidence and the networks within which these women can thrive and take advantage of this opportunity. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Very useful contributions coming from there. Private sector campaign, and here perhaps food for thought, maybe something that I would want to come back to later on is how much of the efforts that are being applied now have the traction and ability to be absorbed by those that we're really targeting to help, because I think this is something that we have to address. Knowledge is power, mainstreaming gender into national policies, and making sure that on an operational basis, we are addressing the key aspects is what I'm hearing from you. And I wanted to pick up on another issue which relates to some of the aspects that you have highlighted. I think the current context that we have is one that has been challenging, but it is also one that has pushed us in a direction where we have become more innovative in terms of our approach. And what we have observed from our work is that women have been those that have been able to sustain themselves first and foremost, because a lot of them have had challenges there. But what they have been able to do is to adapt very quickly. And one of the aspects that we have seen is the expansion of the utilization of the e-com platforms. And according to the IMF, in 2019, e-commerce actually increased by 24%. But with COVID, this has obviously increased this tremendously. Now, in your view, do you feel that Africa is ready enough to utilize this channel or this modality of operation? Do we have enough digital infrastructure in place that can accommodate the opportunities that are to come with the continental free trade area? Do we have enough penetration for women when you take into account the different categories of businesses that we have?
Thank you very much, Madam Tembo. I will say that, first of all, this is an area that I think we need to look at it from the position of necessity being the mother of invention. If you look at what has happened in COVID-19 season, all of us have been forced to adapt and align to the new reality. Right now, I'm speaking to you from Accra, Ghana. Previously, we would have been booking flights, coordinating how we shall meet, but because of this, we have all pivoted, we have all changed the way we do things. And I think this is no less for women entrepreneurs. The scale may be slightly different, but the reality is that we are all pivoting. We have no choice. We've been forced into a disruption. And as we look at the COVID situation, what has happened is that most of the women entrepreneurs have found themselves in three positions. One, either you're thriving, or you're barely surviving, or you have flatlined. Now, whatever the case may be, all the women entrepreneurs have been forced to face up to the reality of change. And I think this is one of the positives we can take out of this, that we have no choice, we've had to move along. In terms of the penetration of technology and internet access, for example, I would say there's still room for growth, but we are in a very good place. If you look at the infrastructure that is available, what we would push for is really more for acceleration of the rollout of 4G and 5G, so that whatever you're doing, you can do it faster, easier. I also believe that the lack of connectivity in some of the African countries has to be addressed so that there's nobody who is left behind. There's still a great digital divide in infrastructure and industrial development across Africa. We are not a homogeneous continent. And so trying to flatten the levels such that countries that are at the peak like Kenya are also the models being used to roll out better in other regions that haven't reached that space. Also including and promoting digital inclusion for the poorest. Digital training for MSMEs should really be emphasized, and for all young people, for the purpose of inclusion in trade, and in order to take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution. It is impossible right now for anybody to operate and thrive and scale their business without the use of technology in one way or the other. So digitalizing must ensure that that's what we do to link up suppliers and buyers to expand markets. And so yes, Africa has got enough digital infrastructure and the minds to innovate and create, to fill whatever gaps that exist. Because if you look at Africa, most of the innovators fall under the bracket of micro and small enterprises. And so these are the people who need to go into this technological space and move along those who are slower. So it's also a generational rally. So I think that the next generation, or rather the current generation actually, because that's everybody from 35 and under, all those guys, they enjoy technology. And I think in terms of access to technology in Kenya and in East Africa, I would say, M-Pesa has also shown as a yardstick how deeply technology has penetrated. So I have no fear that with the use of technology, we will be able to take advantage of the Africa Free Trade Area. And I challenge all women in business and youth in business to take advantage of all the possible solutions that have been prepared by bodies such as the ITC and others, so that we ensure that nobody remains behind or nobody has access to a market because of technological challenges. So if I were to be asked what exactly needs to be done immediately, I think it's very important for us to have a repository where we can check where to buy what, an African Alibaba, or I don't know what to call it, but we need a place where African goods can be posted for us to buy and sell, not just within the continent, but through the world, but specific focus on our continent. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now would like to turn to Ms. Chiruto, the Deputy CEO of KEPSA, and picking up on some of what we have just been discussing and what we have just heard. Clearly, Africa is being innovative because we have been pushed into a position where we have to find solutions. We have to find ways of ensuring that we not only sustain ourselves, but we are also starting to reposition for us to take full advantage of what the Continental Free Trade Area brings to us. And the digital channel is one that has been on the rise. As I indicated a little bit earlier on, is that we have seen from our side, not only is trade, shifting from the usual traditional way that we have been doing this to using more the digital channels. But it is also the reality that a number of our countries are ones that are confronted with challenges on the economic side, in particular in relation to the revenue that is being generated. And obviously it has been a continuous process for our countries to be able to explore and see how they can broaden the base of tax collection. And what we have seen is that in these days that we have broadened or become innovative, on the other hand, we have also seen an introduction of a number of taxes relating to these new channels that are just growing. To you, the question I wanted to pose is, how can we find a balance between taxing these new e-commerce sites and ensuring that MSMEs can still benefit from them? What is KEPSA doing to find this balance for the micro, small, and medium enterprises that depend so very much on this new trade channel? These MSMEs that are so constrained in the current context because they have very few assets that are available to them. Over to you, Ms. Cheruto.
Thank you, Dorothy, and thank you, the organizers and our partners in setting up this forum. Indeed, currently what COVID has proven to us, it is a crisis, and it has actually brought in innovations and people moving their businesses, considering the effects of lockdowns and even restricted movements. So within our country, or even in the world, you've noticed that the digital economy is coming up strongly. But as you rightly put, we're looking at the revenues out of it. From UNCTAD, one of the information we got from them is that in 2018, the value of digital services is about $2.8 trillion. So when you look at that amount of money, then it clearly means it can also be a source of revenue for different countries. But then the question that we always have is, do we really have that capacity locally? And when we're looking at MSMEs, what does it mean for them? Some of them are startups. Others have just decided to move in to make a living out of the space that they have because of the pandemic that is there. So looking at that and looking at where the world is moving into, and even Kenya as a country, that we're introducing a tax, a digital service tax of 1.5%, then it means, and that is from January, anyone who's online has to either appoint a tax representative and at the same time account for the VAT sales that they have. So looking at that and then questioning ourselves, are we really, as Africa, or even Kenya itself, have we matched to the other world, the other part of the world, the other countries? Are we at the same path? The answer could be yes or no, dependent on the country that you're coming from. But what we're looking at the balance is, can we, as we're introducing that, also incentivize people who are moving onto these platforms? And this means in various ways. One, we can even introduce some tax rates in small bits. The other thing is looking at incentives for the startups. The other item that we're actually looking at in this balance is the infrastructure. Do we have the right infrastructure currently to support the platform that you're talking about? And then looking at everyone getting in online. The other question that we would always get into is, how secure is our information online? And do we have policies and regulations that support cybersecurity and even prevent it alongside it? In terms of information sharing, have we built capacity for our MSMEs to understand what it means, how they can market their product online, and even assessing a genuine buyer or a genuine seller so that they engage and still benefit from whatever is happening? We look at the logistics and also the linkages with existing commercial platforms. So that is a balance that would say from SME perspective and even from KEPSA that would like to see as source of revenues being targeted from the digital economy. Now, on to your second question that you asked, Dorothy, was what exactly are we doing to do that balancing? And looking at what we've just discussed, there are various partnerships that we've got into with various organizations so that we can still support MSMEs to get into the digital space. And I can highlight a few of them. Because as KEPSA, we are the apex body, apex private sector body, we do engage government. And one of the places that we do engage is KRA because they are the revenue custodians and they're involved in the collection. So one of the platforms we usually have is the tax roundtable with KRA, where we bring in their team and have our team on board to just discuss the whole scenario and the value chain and see what works best for MSMEs and the country at large. The other thing that we've also put in place is that we have an e-commerce program with Trademark East Africa, that is TIMEA, and this is to support about 2,000 MSMEs. This way, we are aware that it will help them grow into the space, and it involves digital marketing, as well as onboarding them onto the digital platforms that are available. The other thing that I would wish to mention is also using the existing partners. The ones who already have these platforms, what can we do with them? Is that we are linking them. An example can be Jumia to those existing platforms and having MSMEs use those platforms to engage their clients on the business. Maybe to finalize, I want to just highlight two other things that we're doing, as we've all spoken about Ajira and also engagement with government and the digital space, is that we are working closely with the Ministry of ICT in terms of promoting the Ajira digital project. And this is whereby we'll have counties and actually the constituencies we are supporting in refurbishing the constituency innovation hubs, whereby we'll have the youth accessing online platforms and they can actually do their jobs either digitally and also capacity building them. Because as we said, you need a skill for these people for them to take advantage of that. And finally, that I can just access and mention is that we would wish to see more access to the internet and that infrastructure taken to the entire country so that wherever you are, you can still participate in business online and still make your money and still support the government in terms of making money. Thank you very much, Dorothy.
Thank you very much. Very useful contributions coming in through there. I think what we have done this afternoon is really to look at the broad spectrum of the key stakeholders that we need to focus on as we move forward in the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area. We, however, cannot end our discussion without touching on a very critical category of African citizens that we need to really focus on, because these are the future of Africa, and that is the youth. I think we touched a lot on the women. We need to look at the category of youth. And with respect to that, what I wanted to find out from you, Ms. Cheruto, is what do you think are the issues that need to be addressed to create real opportunities for youth and women? And in responding to this, would there be any specific rules or regulations that you think would need to be addressed in this particular context? My apologies.
Thank you, Dorothy. Looking at the discussions that have come up all the way from the initial session, the opening session, and even from the colleagues in the panel, is that indeed we have first to contextualize all the regulations that we have with the existing. So the first question would be, what rules and regulations are we looking at? Are we aligning them to the FTA that we're looking up to within Africa? So because we perform and we work within the customs union, one of the things that we'd feel that needs some reviews and even alignment would be the East African Community Customs Management Act. So that one, we need to align them to really facilitate the youth and even the women-led businesses so that they're still targeted towards that. The other thing, when we look at the entire value chain and we're looking at the FTA within Africa context, then the second thing that we'd wish to see is the public procurement laws. Do they incorporate this segment of people, and what capacity can they take up? In question or in perspective could be, is there a certain percentage that would wish this segment of people to take in, either within the national tenders or international tenders that are there, or any procurement within an organization or the businesses that exist? The other thing that we'd be looking at within this is now the local content. And I remember now what's the definition? Because we're going global or we're going continental, then does it mean is it by country only, or are we looking at buy goods within the context of Africa continent? So if we move towards that direction, then the definition of the local content comes into play where it has to be reviewed. And I can pick up also from what the other speakers mentioned, looking at the rules of origin, we're looking at harmonization of the standards and the policies. What's happening in Kenya, is it similar that is happening within Uganda or Tanzania? Are the standards the same, and do they still apply? When we're looking at the competition policies that are there, what exactly does it mean? So those are the things that we would wish to see. And then looking again at the same, all the sectors. So we'll again analyze all the sectors of the customs union and see within each sector, what policies are there and what regulations. So it will mean analysis and providing solutions. And we as a private sector, as we're always available to do that, and even providing advisory services to other people or to other organizations. And we're happy that we actually work closely with our EABC, being the focal point of the country within Kenya, then working with them and looking at the region as we engage with the other business councils and the federations of the private sector is something that comes in very strongly, because we need to speak as one voice and move this thing. COVID has given us a very good moment right now that, as Dr. Kitui said, this came at the right time for it to get affected next year. Then this became the best place whereby when we have a lockdown within a country, then it means we have to look inwards, and inwards with FTA, the current one with the African continent, and then makes us move beyond country inward to now the continental inward. Thank you, and back to you, Dorothy.
Thank you very much. With that, we come to the end of our first round of discussions, and we move directly into the question and answer phase. And I just want to check my chat. We have a question from Faisal Ahmed, and he says the current biggest challenge is information sharing on different requirements for different markets in Africa. How do we get a one-stop information center for private sector? Anybody wants to, from the panel, that would like to pick up on this and comment before perhaps I make an additional comment from my side?
You'll respond to that.
If I may, this is Peter Mathuki.
Yes.
I think it's important at a time like this, information sharing, particularly trade-related information. And I think it's a high time, as you have said, that we take advantage of the digitalization and create platforms that will be almost immediate, where we can share information on what is happening across the continent. And of course, with social media, where whatever is happening in any part of the world, you get to know in a second, you share it out. I think it's important that we use digitalization and e-commerce to share information on what is happening. And even in the government portals, we create a portal where we can, in fact, assess and see where are we and what are the issues, where are we facing. For example, you are moving your goods from one country to another. You are able to go to a certain portal and check what is happening. And I'm sure the AfCFTA Secretariat, the AU, the regional economic blocks, the national governments, ourselves as private sector, it is possible that we partner in this so that we share information, because it's critical in all aspects if we were to promote intra-Africa trade and if we were to, of course, deal with some of the challenges that are likely to come by. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My dear brother from Arusha, did you want to come in? No, I think I just wanted to add to what has been said on the ITC side. We are actively working with the African Union, and one of the tools that we are providing, which is known as the Trade Observatory, is precisely one that goes in the direction that is being proposed in the context of this question. We are consolidating different information relating to trade within that tool, and we will give up-to-date information. This is information that will be readily available to all countries, for all within the countries, including private sector, to be able to have access to this information. The aspect I would perhaps add to the conversation we are having today is that we need to take into account that, you know, those that are export ready, those are normally already in the business, it's much easier for them to be able to do this. But if we are looking at inclusiveness, how do we get this information to reach those that are in categories perhaps that are not necessarily in a position to be able to access this information? So could we use institutions that we have to be able to share this information in different ways? I think this is part of what we have to think about going forward. A final question I would just want to put on the table relates to Rose, who is from Moms in Business Forum in Kenya. And this, I believe, is a network of moms that have gone into business and are really looking for opportunities. And her question is there a possibility for broadening the engagement with the different additional associations, women-related associations, within the context of the work that we are doing on women empowerment? And Aisatu, I will give you the floor to respond to that question.
Sorry, Dorothy, I'm listening. Yes?
I was giving you the floor to respond to the question that you wanted to respond to, that Rose raised in relation to Moms in Business Forum.
I cannot.
Okay, let me just pick it from here. Our women empowerment efforts are ones that are implemented through the initiative that we call the She Trades initiative. And we have this, this initiative being implemented at a country level through the different chapters. What we do is really to work with the governments and indeed work with private sector to make sure that they are an integral part of this process. But the ownership is really with the countries. So in terms of who's part and parcel of this, which I believe is open to all institutions, is one that that is readily available. So to directly respond to your question, yes, you can be a part of this. What you have to do is to go through the Ministry of Industrialization to speak to the focal point there so that you are integrated to be part of the Kenya chapter.
Dorothy, now.
Okay, so with that, perhaps I could suggest that we wind up here, as I think we have eaten into the time of the next session. And I wanted to thank all the panelists for their very, very useful contributions to this discussion. It has been an interesting one. Part of the takeaway is that obviously we have a lot of information of what we have done within the region, which has worked very well, which we need to build on and consolidate going forward as we reposition ourselves for the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area. But what is also important is that we ensure that our interaction with private sector is one that is institutionalized, because what I'm hearing from the panelists, particularly from the private sector today, is that they're very clear in terms of what needs to be done, and that we then have to find or work together in terms of finding the solutions. And those solutions should be inclusive, should be sustainable. So thank you very, very much to my panelists for your time and for the very, very useful contributions that have been made. Back to I think I'm giving it back to Nairobi for now. Thank you so much. A big hand for my panelists. Thank you. Over to you, Nairobi.
Thanks once again, Your Excellency, Madam Tembo. I would like also to thank all the speakers for their insights and the well-moderated session by you, Madam Tembo. I'm informed that the Cabinet Secretary's deputy, Honorable Lawrence Macharia, is also on hold. I don't know if he's already connected. Maybe he can maybe say a word, one or two. Madam Executive Director, all protocols observed. Hello, Honorable Lawrence Macharia, are you around? Okay, maybe he's not connected. I'll propose, because we are running out of time, I'll probably just do a brief introduction to the next session that we are going into. We have already eaten a lot into our time. I'd like to remind you that the next session is a maximum of 30 minutes, so please stick to time if that will be possible. The next session is on trade promotion organizations, building bridges for AfCFTA. The main facilitator will be Ms. Mioba Lubemba, who is a senior advisor and of the Trade Support Institution Strengthening at the ITC. The main contributors will be Dr. Wilfred Marube and Ludmila Azo, who is the country manager of ITC back in Geneva. After that, we'll have another brief session on e-commerce. I know everybody is very much interested in this also. E-commerce in the context of COVID, a new mode of intra-regional trade. This is where I believe we are heading to. The facilitator will be Mr. Sebastian Loanitis, who is an advisor on marketing and branding and e-commerce at the ITC, with contributors being Ms. Joanne Mwangi and me, myself. The third session will be public-private dialogue, new partners in development. This is where we are heading, with the private sector basically helping the governments in development. The facilitators will be Mr. Ruben Puchand, who is the chief for the African office at the ITC, and Ms. Victoria Tuomisto, who is the program officer at ITC. The main contributor will be Ms. Rose Rono, who is the director of Trade Kentrade. I hope she's joined in also. The last session will be democratizing trade information across continents, the prospects of the African Trade Observatory. The main facilitators will be Cyril Chalendad, who is an associate program officer, trade and market intelligence at the ITC, and Ms. Jacqueline Salguero Human, who is an associate economics affairs officer, trade and markets intelligence at IFC. And the main contributors here will be Mr. Kenneth Bagamunda of the EAC and Dr. Peter Madhuki, EABC. And then we'll conclude with a brief session on the call of action by Mrs. Cheruto, Martha Cheruto, the Deputy CEO of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, who will be together with Ruben Puchand, who is the Chief Officer for Africa, and Ms. Aisato Diallo, who is the AfCFTA coordinator at ITC. Thank you once again. I would like to hand over this session to Ms. Mioba Lubemba, if you are on.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Distinguished guests, all protocols observed. My names are Mioba Lubemba, and I am Senior Program Officer for Institutional Strengthening, and I'm involved in the work that ITC does to support business support organizations, such as trade promotion organizations, chambers of commerce, sector associations, including women entrepreneurs associations and youth organizations. I'm really honored to make this presentation to you today. So I'll be focusing on how we can build bridges, how BSOs can build bridges to ensure that enterprises can take advantage of the opportunities offered by the free trade area at the continental level. In this panel, I'm very honored to be joined by Dr. Wilfred Marube, who's the CEO of KEPROBA. I'm also joined by Ms. Ludmila Azo, who is the country manager for Kenya, and she's working a lot in the East African region. I will now share my screen. The technical officer, I'm unable to share my screen. Please kindly enable my sharing rights. I request again to the technical colleagues to enable my sharing rights, please. Thank you very much. One second, excuse me. Excuse me, the screen share function is not my friend today with the technology. 1 second, please. Excuse me. I will try that once again. If it doesn't work, then I'll ask the colleagues to be in my presentation on my behalf.
I was proposing if you have
the presentation, please beam it up for me. I'll be very grateful. I am having trouble with the double screens. Excuse me for that.
I was proposing if you are having technical issues, maybe we can have the Honorable Lawrence Macharia say a word or two as we handle the technical issues.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Honorable. Are you ready, Mioba? In case you're ready, you can please go on.
I may proceed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. I will do that now. Okay. Please confirm for me again once you're able to see my screen. I believe you can now see.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Excellent, we're good to go. Thank you very much for your patience. And my display of technical skills just now is one of the points I'm about to make. So I'm not a very good example of one of the important things I want to tell you today about skills development. In my presentation, I'll be using a few acronyms. So I'd just like to highlight them so that we are all on the same page in terms of terminologies. So there's the term TPO, which you have seen in the program, which is Trade Promotion Organization. And I will also refer to Chambers of Commerce and Industry. These all fall under the umbrella of business support organizations, any organization that is supporting enterprises. And today we're really concerned about those that are supporting enterprises who are exporting. So these also all can be called trade and investment support institutions. We know that trade promotion organizations are really critical to the economy. Chambers of commerce are important in the conversation that we're having today. Chambers of commerce are really critical in terms of being a voice for the private sector. They provide this credible bridge already. And so in this case, in the context of the CFTA, it's really crucial that this relationship is strengthened and the voice is very well heard. In terms of trade promotion organizations, we have already demonstrated evidence that when you invest $1 in export promotion, the potential is there to achieve at least $87 in return. And we have conducted a few studies in this area. So this really places an impetus for governments to support those government agencies that are delivering these types of services, such as KEPSA, and of course for members of associations to ensure that they pay into the coffers of business sector associations. So one of the issues that we always see with sector associations is that they don't have enough resources, and the companies that are adhering to these associations are complaining, but they're not paying their membership fees. So we remind them today that for these organizations to function, you really need to make sure that you pay your membership fees. In terms of some of the critical aspects of what organizations should be and do to deliver on actualization of the CFTA, there are some critical good practices that they need to follow. And we at ITC have a framework in the form of the benchmarking model, which compares the very best practices around the world in terms of what works. So when we look at what institutions should be, there are 4 key pillars where they should perform well, where they should invest to be strong and to be able to deliver good services to their members. So under leadership and direction, we're focusing on issues of governance, issues of strategy. And here, one of the points that we make is that strategy should be bottom up. It should be all inclusive. There has to be a dialogue between the organizations and their members and their clients to make sure that they understand what their constituents are looking for. In this sense, we really emphasize a lot that when you're facing new opportunities, things that have worked in the past don't necessarily function in the same way. So looking at the opportunities of the CFTA, there has to be a deliberate effort to identify what is it that we need to change in what we're doing to ensure that our enterprises can achieve the results. So there has to be that shift in thinking. When it comes to the service offering, it's very important that organizations are client-centric. They have to listen to their members or to their clients. And the executive director stressed earlier this morning that it is the enterprises who are doing business. So they know where it hurts. They know what the issues are. We as organizations or as trade promotion organizations, as chambers of commerce, we may not have operated in the private sector before in many cases. So you really need to have a structure in place to make sure that you capture those specific issues. And you need to be well result oriented. If you do not know what your targets are, you will not know how to get there, and you don't know if you are on your way there. So these 4 aspects are really critical. In the slides that we have shared, there's much more than what I'm going to talk about here because the time is limited. But behind this model, when you visit our website there, you will go deeper into the specific aspects, and organizations are able to use this model to benchmark themselves and see where the weaknesses are, where they need to improve their structures or their operations, the way they're handling their services, the way they are operating to rise to the new challenges ahead. So I would like to focus on 5 critical game changers that trade promotion organizations need to focus on to build bridges and ensure that enterprises can optimize the opportunities of the CFTA. The first one, you must put the enterprises first, clients first. The client is always right. If you have services that do not meet the needs of the enterprises, there will always be a mismatch and a misapplication of resources. On this point, I want to emphasize that you have to conduct a diagnostic. All services must be driven by a specific diagnostic. It's like when you go to the doctor. The doctor does not just guess what is wrong with you, and he does not only listen to your symptoms. He does a diagnostic to check exactly what is happening with your vitals. This is the same with a structured diagnostic. You need to look at the strategic competences, the production competences, the marketing competences, the resource management expertise and competences. Do these enterprises have what it takes? Are they export ready? What is actually missing in terms of their operations? If there are specific products that they're producing, what is the match with the market? Are they meeting the quality requirements? Do they have appropriate human resources, people who have knowledge about the market? Once you do this type of diagnostic, you can identify what exactly is the issue that each enterprise requires, where the trade promotion organization or the Chamber of Commerce will come in. So you need to really focus on those key drivers of enterprise competitiveness. And behind each and every area that I'm looking at today, there are so many tools behind that you can find available with ITC and other partners. Everything has a strong methodology behind it that you can apply. So put the enterprises first, understand what they require, go beyond the symptoms, dig deeper to understand exactly what are the issues they're facing, what are their challenges, what are the opportunities that they could optimize. One of the things that I want to emphasize here before we move on to the next slide is that you have to apply a deliberate segmentation, and I'm really glad that Madam Maina touched on this point. Enterprises are different. There's a very big gap between what a registered company would be able to do and what an innovative entrepreneur will be able to do, what a youth can do. There are different challenges that women entrepreneurs face compared to other structured organizations. So larger companies, of course, have got a whole big team doing market research for them, looking for market intelligence, but smaller enterprises rely on business support organizations and trade promotion organizations. There are a number of services that you can prioritize, but above the umbrella of what is business advocacy, what is trade intelligence, what are trade support services in terms of enterprise development and matchmaking, organizing and attending trade promotional events and taking business matchmaking events, B2Bs, there is method and deliberate strategy behind each component. So what this means is that when you're organizing, for example, let's look at this service of matchmaking. When you're matching your enterprises to foreign buyers, there has to be a proper analysis on the capacity of those entrepreneurs to supply. So most B2Bs fail because there are people sitting in front of each other who are not interested in what each one has to offer. You need to understand what is the capacity of your producers to supply. Are they certified? Are they able to ship the products on time? Are the parameters that they are following in terms of production, in terms of the chemicals they're using?
Mioba, we cannot hear you.
The big package of we are having an event, but really apply analytics to what is the potential. critical organization capabilities. I want to emphasize skills. And on this point, I really encourage business support organizations to make sure that among their staff, there are people who have worked in the private sector. There are people who have worked as export managers or as production engineers, people who really know what it takes to do business. This does not take away from the expertise of the business experts or the economists that are in these organizations, but you need to have a very good mix of expertise and capabilities to bridge the new environment that we'll be working in. It cannot be business as usual. To really optimize resources, these are the issues that can help you take off from your results today to what could be the potential of the CFTA. I want to emphasize data and technological infrastructure. Later on, I'm talking about digitalization. And on data, I want to really encourage you to invest in client relationship management systems. Why? You need to have a good record of the different companies that you're working with to understand exactly what is the capacity and the different factors that I talked about that affect competitiveness earlier on. And so on this point, if you know what are the different capacities of your clients and what they're producing, what parameters they're meeting, when opportunities come up, when there are inquiries, you know which companies are capable of meeting these market opportunities and taking advantage. So one thing we know is that you will never have enough people to serve all the exporting companies. We look at organizations like the KNCCI, they have some offices around the country, but organizations like KEPSA only have a couple of offices, and the ratio of staff to companies is really, it really drowns the organization in terms of what they can do to meet the client needs. But when you have a proper system in place, it means you can use modeling to ensure that you can service deliver one-to-many, meeting the needs that are common to specific segments and ensuring that you can achieve better results with a larger group of enterprises. So when we talk about digitalization later on, I'm going to talk about scale and show you how you can use digital solutions to reach more clients. As organizations, you have specific mandate. Your capabilities and your resources are not adequate to meet all the needs of enterprises. You are part of an ecosystem. There are other players like line ministries, other organizations, private sector associations, academic and research institutions, private sector players, multinationals, financial sector players, and there are organizations like Exim Bank, AFDB, who can be partners in resources, in financing. In this case, it's really critical that you identify those collaborative partners, those potential suppliers of services that you are not able to deliver to your companies, and connect your enterprises to them. So you can do partnerships like special projects, knowledge exchange. And on this point, I come back to what Honorable Machuki was saying when he talked about connectivity among the organizations in Africa. When chambers come together, their business members come together and they have a better understanding of what the opportunities are between the two groups. It also means you can be more cohesive when you're discussing policy. Furthermore, it means you can build projects together to ensure that you address non-tariff barriers and other issues that are arising. On networking, I want to emphasize the opportunity that comes with connectivity among trade promotion organizations. So in the International Trade Center, we have the World Trade Promotion Organization Network, which includes a conference, and it also includes a process, a peer-reviewed process where we identify good practices and there's exchange among the players. In the different regions, like in South America, there's the Ibero Association, and then the Europeans also have their own network. Active and ECOWAS and also UMOA have got their own networks that are now becoming more and more active. This connectivity between trade promotion organizations means that you have quicker access and you have a man on the ground that can put you in contact and put your companies in contact with those players who are supplying products that could be inputs in production for your companies. So sometimes when we encourage TPOs to be partners, they always talk about we are competing, how can it deliver any value for us? But this gives you eyes on the ground. When you're organizing a mission, you have somebody to work with on the ground. With the CFTA, this will become more crucial because there may not be as good an understanding by East African companies of, for example, North African markets. So, yes.
have 2 more minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. In the slides that you've received, there are a couple of examples of maps that you need to put together. So this one here illustrates what the opportunities are in the Kenyan ecosystem. As teams within these organizations, take a look at what your clients need, what you can offer them, and examine who else is in the ecosystem that could offer an added value, an added service that you can connect your companies to. Now on digitalization, I think this is the most critical strategic element that enterprises and business support organizations need to look to right now. I want to emphasize data. We're talking about digitalization, everybody's talking about technology, but I want to dig deeper on data. No digital solution can work well without correct data. So the first thing that we encourage organizations to do is to make sure that they are data-driven. Use data to make decisions. This way, it means when you're applying any mechanisms, any platforms, any algorithms, you already have information that you can use to make the right decisions. Let's go to the trade obstacles alert mechanism, for example. You will have access to a multitude of information about different markets, but it will take time for you to sift through all this data. If you have a good structure within the organization in terms of who are your clients, what are their parameters, you can have an algorithm that matches your clients to those obstacles, and you have alerts that tell you exactly what affects your exporters, and then you can zero in on those specific needs. At ITC, we have a special program that we are rolling out at the moment to help BSOs digitalize, and it covers various aspects in terms of what they need to be, what they need to have, and what they need to do. So we'll be able to help you build a specific data-centric digitalization strategy. There are a couple of examples from the region that I want to emphasize, and my favorite one from East Africa is the East African Grain Council's GSOCO. So most of you are aware of this platform where they're able to use market data, producer information to match buyers and sellers. These are platforms that need to be built when you think about the African Continental Free Trade Area to ensure that you can connect enterprises to emerging opportunities. Another case study that you find in the materials talks about the ASEAN single window. Here we're being more ambitious. What can be achieved at the East African level? You have the Kenyan single window, which is functioning very well and ensuring that certain challenges are addressed. What about at the continental level, or even at the EAC level, starting from there to the tripartite level and then to the continental level? Much more can be achieved if there's this interconnectivity that can be a platform for digitalization. Ladies and gentlemen, there's so much behind each slide that I have shared with you today. In fact, there's a module on each topic, so we could take 3 days just going through what are the specific issues. You'll receive slides which have got more information than what I've talked about, but I'm really excited to hear from you and listen to some of the questions you might have. I will now pose a question to the panelists that we have, and I'll start with Ludmila. Ludmila, are you available? Excellent. So Ludmila, with the different things that we've heard today, what do you think are the most critical partnerships that business support organizations should be looking into?
Thanks, Miyoba, and greetings to all our participants and panelists, Jambo and Karibu Sana. Thanks, Miyoba, as well for the presentation and the wide spectrum of partnership and partners network you laid in your presentation. And I would like to emphasize something. Let's remind ourselves that TPOs in our African countries are relatively young. The average year of entry into operations of the modern incarnations of the agencies is 2003, a bit earlier in Kenya, let's say 1994. Those TPOs are at a relatively early step of their functional development. So it may be wiser to embrace the partnership building on a gradual manner to make sure that resources that are already scarce, as we know, that are already limited for them, are oriented on a focused and efficient way. So 2 key partnership streams that I think would be wiser to pursue here is the first one between, and this is something BSOs and TPOs in Kenya are already doing pretty well. I've seen engagement between KEPROBA, KenTrade, KenInvest, and the PS cabinet, etc. So this is something that is ongoing, but that can be enhanced so that the needs of MSMEs to succeed within the 3 trillion in growth potential market that the AfCFTA is, can inform and feed into policy making, including in terms of enabling a conducive business environment in support of the Continental Agreement success. And TPOs have a critical role to play in getting together and supporting in an integrated manner the development and monitoring of the implementation of national AfCFTA strategies. We have been witnessing good practices across the continent. Many countries have started, developing their national strategies. So this is something that would be important that TPOs take active part in. The second partnership streams that I would like to emphasize and call upon TPOs and BSOs in Kenya and across other countries is to increase collaboration between themselves, both locally and across the continent. The AfCFTA has ambitious and rightfully ambitious goals that involve bold, focused, and coordinated interventions, coordinated between the various national trade promotion agencies, but based on their respective competitive advantage. And these need to be coordinated in a sustainable manner. And such sustainable competitive advantage will not be possible in this knowledge-based competition without continuous innovation. And we also know that innovations by nature emerge in interactions between, in which diverse actors, whether it's public, private, or even civil society and international organizations, the ITC, share complementary knowledge, expertise. So bridges need to be built first among TPOs within the same country and assure that there is a clear delineation of roles and responsibilities and that they go above this competition mindset. So collaboration, and you emphasize that, is whether it's vertical or horizontal, is a prerequisite for trade promotion actors if they wish to leverage such knowledge and effectively grow trade and exports. The second and final partnership stream that I would like to emphasize is horizontal collaboration amongst TPOs across the continent. We can't continue to work in silo. TPOs need to see how to share information and knowledge among themselves and consider building on the successful experience and practices of the RDB in Rwanda, of JPA in Ghana, or KEPSA, Kentrade, Kinvest in Kenya, or APEXI in Cote d'Ivoire, and to have regular coordination engagement on AfCFTA implementation. Why not considering AfCFTA TPOs working group, perhaps, with regular meetings on how to engage within the AfCFTA summit, etc. Promoting collaboration through an online TPOs e-repository or e-library, as we call it. We have seen, you mentioned the IBE role in Latin America. It's a good success on that. And the EU as well has been quite successful on that as well. And the ITC has been, as you mentioned, pushing or supporting the development of TPO's network within the WIMO and now within the ECOWAS. So this needs something that needs to be leveraged at the continental level so that the region can better trade within itself, but also sell itself to the outside world. So I'm not going to take much longer on my interventions, and thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ludmila. Fantastic interventions. I'm really glad with the emphasis that you've placed on collaboration. And one thing I wanted to just point out is that actually some of the best solutions that we've been able to offer our clients have come out of these connections. So from time to time, like for the case of Kenya, we have been able to work with SINDE, which is the institution responsible for investment promotion. In our records, according to our benchmarking, they're actually the best in the world. And they've been able to offer some services to IPAs in the region, including KENInvest, sharing experiences on how Kenya can succeed to maximize on investment opportunities. I want to come back to innovation before I ask the next panelist the question. And many studies that have been done, and you see articles written by McKinsey, and a lot of research done by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and there's some publications that we can share with you. actually innovation. The most successful companies historically, even before the fourth industrial revolution, have been those that were data-driven. What is different now is that we have these technologies that we can use to help us make even smarter decisions with the data that we have. There's so much information available out there that can help us make smarter decisions. I would now like to turn to our other honorable panelist, Dr. Wilfred Marube, who's heading KEPROBA, fantastic institution. Sir, I would like to find out from you, what has been your experience in terms of trying to get KEPROBA to be a digitalized institution? What has been your experience? What challenges have you faced, and what opportunities do you see moving forward?
But just to quickly chime in, about 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mioba. And first, I need to appreciate actually that you took me to a probably 10 minutes masterclass. I really appreciated going through the slides, and I'll be happy probably if you share with us, with me that I'll really appreciate. I've learned quite a lot from that. And it points out probably
the mic.
Okay, are you able to hear me now?
It's better now. Yes, sir. Please proceed.
I was saying that looking at your slide before I respond to your question, the question basically I'm looking at is the preparedness of the Kenya Export Promotion and Planning Agency, both in terms of strategic orientation, in terms of its capacity, in terms of its capabilities, and other resources, in order to move into the digital space and perhaps take advantage of the African Confederation Trade Area. In terms of our strategy, it's very clear that digital is actually the future, and not even the future is the present, a digital strategy. So as an agency, we realize on the critical part that for us to be able to facilitate export trade from the business supporting management organizations and from the producers, we need to provide with them a tool, the fastest tool for them to be able to access the markets where the buyers and sellers can meet and perhaps even fully exploit or finalize their potential. So having said that, there are about 2 interventions that we have put in place. The first one is at the moment we are working on an exporters portal, a holistic exporters portal, which just is not about showcasing, but which will be able to facilitate dialogue, and then possibly transactions between the buyer and seller. So we are going to enable that everybody, including the micro and small enterprises, be able to meet on a digital platform, which of course we are working, it's a conception stage, which probably we'll be able to roll out in the next few months once we initiate the procurement process. But in terms of concept, we are looking at having a digital platform that meets the needs of both the buyer and seller. That's one thing we're working on. And as an agency, we're also working on availing digital platforms, e-marketing platforms like Alibaba and others, so that our would-be producers and exporters, especially those ones who do not have the financial muscle or even the capacity to access the market on their own, so that they be able to leverage on that. One thing that we do not have, and I'm happy you mentioned that you could support institutions like us come up with a digitization strategy on how do we best use data and how do we come up with a strategy. So we believe that by probably leveraging on the partnership and the support that's available from ITC, you could be able to actually to help us arrive much faster at our digital agenda. Let me call it the digital export agenda for our institution. So we are very keen, and we look forward to a support from ITC and other players. And I'm glad that you also mentioned there's need for us to collaborate as trade promotion organizations. So it will be very probably, maybe as one of my challenge maybe is to throw it to ITC. Why don't you probably convene just basically, even if it's an online engagement between the trade promotion organizations within the East African region to start with. Those are about 5 or 6 countries. And I think that will be a good starting point before we be able to institutionalize this kind of approach to a much broader aspect within Africa. With that, I think I'll, because I had 2 minutes, I think I've taken about 3 or 4. Thanks a lot, Mioba.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marube. Thank you for your intervention. Just to the time manager and the Master of Ceremonies, please allow me to take the only one question that we have from the audience. Mr. Faisal Ahmed is very concerned.
1 minute for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. They've given us 1 minute. So Mr. Ahmed is asking about how we can address plugging in the logistical aspect into regarding the ecosystem engagement, because one of the issues is that is being faced is about movement of goods in terms of infrastructure and costs. So one of the things that we've observed is that actually when producers pool together, it's much easier to reduce some of the costs of transportation. So there are a number of cases. In fact, in East Africa, there's a case with the horticulture producers when some of the aviation companies cut down their flights, they were able to pull together their products. So they were able to have a product from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, from Zambia, and from Kenya, and they could transport their products. The challenge we have is at the continental level. And this is why infrastructure is a very important priority. Now, one of the things that you need to do is to connect and establish relationships between organizations, including those freight forwarders. They don't appear on our mapping, but they're really crucial, and they tend to have associations of their own. It's very important to have conversations with them to understand what are the options and what are the good choices that you can make to ensure that your goods get to where they're going. My colleagues who will be coming after me will be going deeper into some of the service areas, and these all tie into what BSOs need to do. And the one that is coming immediately now, talking more on the e-commerce aspect of things, really adds on to what we've been discussing here. So I look forward to discussing digitalization more with all of you, and to rolling out interventions that can help us bring enterprises to the market on the continent. Thank you very much. I hand back to the master moderator. Thank you, and I wish you a good day. Keep safe.
Thank you, Mioba, Lubemba, and Dr. Wilfred Marube. I truly appreciate. And Ludmila, thank you for this interesting session. We'll most likely move to the next session. I hope Mr. Sebastian Loantitis, advisor on marketing and branding and e-commerce at the ITC, is available for the next session entitled E-commerce in the Context of COVID, a New Mode of Inter-Regional Trade. It will be the contributors will basically be me, Joan Mwangi, and Mr. Sebastian. Are you up?
Yes, hello. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
So let me share my screen with you. I think it's this one. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Do you see the second screen now, just in case?
Yeah.
Context. Okay. Agenda. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Sebastian Ioannitis McCall. I'm an expert in marketing, branding, and e-commerce for the International Trade Center in Geneva. And today I'm going to talk to you about e-commerce within the AfCFTA framework and within also the COVID context. So what I'm going to tackle here today is actually an agenda across 5 points. First one being just an overview of what e-commerce in the Africa context is about. And then I will tackle some issues that exporters usually face in terms of meeting offer and demand, in terms of logistics, in terms of communication and reaching out to this demand, and in terms of marketing and branding in the end. Due to the shorter session, there are some elements I cannot tackle here, like payments and the overall ecosystem. But I think those 4 ones here are extremely important and very interesting. So just to put everything within context and especially the context of Africa, here you can see on this graph the growth of e-commerce across the world, across the continents between 2013 and 2017. So if we look at, for example, Europe, it went through $312 billion to $445 billion, so an increase of 43% in a span of 5 years. if we look at and you see that it's probably the same type of growth for the other continents, except Asia Pacific region with 174%. If we look at Africa now, you can see that in terms of online trade, those numbers are actually quite small, to 27 billions in 2013, up to $51 billion in 2017. So a growth of 90%. So needless to say that although those numbers are quite low for the time being, the potential is there. The potential exists and is yet to grow over the years, with some expectations that in 5 years we will reach about $70 to $80 billion in terms of B2C sales across the African continent, and that helped by the AfCFTA agreement. So definitely growth, because there's 1.27 billion consumers, and by 2030 it will reach and will have an increase of about 50%, about 1.7 billion consumers on the market. And the issue as well resides overall for the African market in the fact that there is only 18% of the households who have access to the internet throughout the continent, and less than 10% of the people who have access to the internet. And you see that less than 5% of the population only buys online. So needless to say that there's a huge potential, but there's also a big way to go. So in terms of growth at a macro level, there is definitely a shift that will be operated as we grow towards development of e-commerce. In terms of sectors, those who produce, and in terms of markets, those who buy, with a high potential for job creation and for economic growth in general. In terms now of the different issues that exporters are facing, I would say the first one is probably offer and demand. Too often I hear people thinking that e-commerce, being in e-commerce, is about developing a website, basically an IT activity. And I would say probably the IT part is 5% of what e-commerce is about. E-commerce is a channel of sales, which takes part of an overall marketing context of offering something that is needed for some buyers, for some consumers on the other end. So you may have the best website on this planet, but if you don't know what the others are willing to buy, you will actually fail. So the main issues that we notice as part of all the projects that we run in e-commerce, and especially in Africa, is the lack of knowledge about the buyer's preferences. Of course, the local context, in most cases, sellers, they know about their local context, but the moment actually you open up to the international market, and especially the African market, you cannot expect that everyone is going to buy the same products that you are selling to your domestic market. So definitely there's a lack of knowledge about buyers' preferences. There's a lack of knowledge about competition as well. So if you don't know about what the buyers want, there is a high likelihood that you don't know even more what the competition is about. And those two aspects can take shape within a lack of strategic thinking. What is the strategy, and what is your unique positioning with respect? You define a unique positioning with respect to what the buyers want and what the competition actually does, and you are there actually to offer something of value that is better than what the competition is to offer. The fourth element is a lack of communication and communication resources and efforts in general, because people think that now they have a website that suddenly that they will appear to the entire continent and to the whole world, and very far from it. As you have more competition, it also makes you in a way less visible, and you need actually to kind of shout. You need to make yourself visible in order for people to be able to find you. And last but not least, there's a lack of online buyers in general. I showed you just in the previous slide here that less than 5% of the population in Africa currently buys online. So it means that there's also a big potential, but it also means that this segment for the time being is quite small, and there's a lot of education to be done to African buyers in order for them to embrace this way of buying. In terms of offer and demand, knowledge of the market, and I'll give you an example of Rwanda, a project actually I managed a year ago, and we were actually to sell domestically to the Rwandese market. And this applies, and this knowledge of domestic market is important. Knowing about what Rwanda actually wants is important for Kenyans or for Senegalese who want to sell to Rwanda, for example. What we realize is that in terms of what people prefer, it's first of all, it's clothing, shoes, and leather goods. Then we had groceries, then we had phones, airtime for the mobile phone, cosmetics, and I would say electronics also. It was quite an important element of it. And then there were some other elements because we were actually to promote Made in Rwanda products through online channels. And then we realized that it was not possible to sell Made in Rwanda products to Rwandese through the digital channel. There's a huge potential aside the digital channel, but through digital channels, it was not possible. So having a very good knowledge of what the market demands is very important. So cross-border trade requires a better knowledge of markets, what buyers need and want, at what price, at what quality, and at what time. And we had conducted a very comprehensive consumer research study for Rwanda. But you have plenty of information already on the internet. There's a lot of Google tools that are available that allows you to have a better grasp of what consumers actually need. Another example of Rwanda as well is what are the key demotivators for people to buy online. First thing is that 41% of them are saying, I don't know about online shopping. So definitely there's a big gap here and a lot of education to be done. Another item is online sites are expensive. I doubt the authenticity of the merchandise available online. So trust in the supplier. Delivery times as well are very important to take into consideration. Online shopping requires technical skill. At least this is a perception. And again, related to trust, I cannot check the quality, authenticity of products online. Very important, therefore, to understand the configuration of the market, of the consumers, what they buy, what they don't want to buy online, for which reason they buy, and for which reasons actually they don't buy online. Second issue is logistics. There's a high cost of logistics domestically, but also across Africa in general. And there's a need actually to better structure the logistic infrastructure. Challenges with timely delivery. Challenges with delivery at the right place. And this pertains actually to two other issues, root causes: lack of a dressing system in Africa and lack of skilled drivers with a good knowledge of the cities. At the end of the day, you have you have the people, you have buyers who don't know basically where they live according to a structured system, and they'll give you this kind of information. I live 2 streets down the church on the left of the shop with a blue window, for example. And this doesn't work for e-commerce. So you need to have systems in place. 2 solutions. Yes.
2 minutes, s'il te plaît.
2 minutes, okay. So 2 solutions here, having an addressing system, but through a solution, the GPS-based solution, in order to have delivery, accurate delivery. So we have this nice tool like What 3 Words that tells you that basically segments the whole world and the whole African continent into squares of 3 meters. And at the end of the day, you can have addresses like bunch, forks, and raft, and you know exactly where it is placed on the map. Therefore, the shippers have to be equipped with GPS solutions, and the buyers can have real-time tracking of their shipment. Another solution is logistics, to have the solutions consigned in a warehouse so that the sellers can focus on what they can do best, and the goods are stored into an e-fulfillment center for this e-fulfillment center to be able to ship the goods. Therefore, you have trained and skilled people at handling the logistics and the returns management. You minimize the cost of shipping because you consolidate everything, and you have better negotiation power with those guys like DHL, UPS, and truck companies. And it allows the suppliers at the end of the day to focus on what they do best. In terms of promotion, one thing which is important, which is the marketplaces that sellers can sell onto. I would say probably as a starter, don't start by developing your own website, but integrate yourself into marketplaces that exist in Africa, because you'll have difficulties to be found on the web if you have your own website, because you have to put a lot of money into promotion. And when found, you'll have difficulties to be trusted by those buyers, as shown by the statistics. So if you're onto marketplaces, we talk about Jumia quite a lot, but there's a lot of marketplaces in Africa, then you have a stronger chance actually to be more visible and to be picked. At ITC, we've put into place a solution called Marketplace Africa, which is available at the link ecomconnect.org. You have more than 400 marketplaces where we have the profile, product categories, what they sell, their traffic and everything, so that if you want to target a market, you can know with more accuracy which marketplaces you are best to integrate first. In terms of trust, I mentioned trust before. There was an issue with people trusting that the company exists, that they will receive their product and everything. You have this e-commerce trust mark called safe.shop, which is internationally recognized and developed by the e-commerce foundation. So you have to follow a set of requirements. You are certified, and then you can display the logo on your website. Promotion, Google ads and Facebook ads. I will pass on that one. And last but not least, I'll just take one more minute, marketing and branding. The issue is that you have an increased competition from African suppliers as the market is now open. So therefore, there are every suppliers in Africa who can target every country in a way. It may take a bit of time, but you have to be prepared for that. Then the challenges with being visible among this newly developed crowd. There's already a lot of international players. There is the domestic players, and now you have the African players as well. And this creates a big crowd and a challenge actually with being chosen as the one among the crowd. You want to be the one they actually buy from. So, and marketing and branding, having a brand is absolutely essential to be visible, to be different. And there's a study from McKinsey that says that in terms of profits, having a strong brand can multiply your profits by a factor of 2. I will just keep those ones. And for B2B, for those who are into B2B here, branding is very important as well, having a strong brand. You can see that it accounts for between 15 to 20% of the purchasing decision from buyers, on top of price, product and services, sales, and customer information. Branding is not about a logo. A lot of people actually are into logo. First, a lot of people do not even have a brand, a logo. Many people actually have a logo, and then they go into low cost. But what branding is about being different, differentiation, being unique, meeting customers' needs better than what the competition is to offer. Last slide. I just invite you actually to get connected to our platform, the Ecom Connect platform, which is a community platform, a community management platform. You'll find thousands of peers, of suppliers and experts as well. You can connect with your peers all across the world, all across Africa. You can ask experts for advice. You can share information. There are 4 e-learning modules available, and there is data that we share continuously on this platform. You've got this tool, the e-commerce marketplace Africa platform, which I just mentioned, an e-commerce cost calculator if you want to get into the Amazon marketplace, eBay, Etsy marketplace as well. And you have an e-commerce readiness quiz to assess your level of maturity in terms of getting into e-commerce. So Voila for my part. Sorry if I took a little bit of more time. You have my contact details just in case here. So thank you very much. And I would like actually to share the floor with Miss Joanne Mwangi in order for her to share her impressions about this presentation and e-commerce in Africa within the AfCFTA agreement. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. I do not know how you can see me clearly. I'm struggling a little bit here.
At least I can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I want to apologize that I have to join from a tablet because I had to move. I just want to make my comment and say that, first of all, your presentation is very, very informative and very useful. So thank you very much for the presentation. It sets a very good stage because as a marketing expert, one of the things I have found increasingly is that businesses in Africa are not doing a very good job in terms of packaging and in terms of marketing and identifying who the key addressable market is. And for this reason, the use of technology and particularly from data is very important, using data, because if you do not use data, then you're just making guesses in what you're doing. And I think that when you talk about technology, I particularly enjoyed also the previous session because the information that is filtering through would be particularly useful for people who are moving forward. Now, when I listened to your presentation, the one area that has stood out for me is the fact that I am selling something, differentiating it is not just for my purpose, but for the target audience. And I think that is something that we need to apply across the board for all the communication that everybody is doing across the free trade area. We all have products. How do we differentiate the product? How do we ensure that this particular product from one country becomes the hallmark? And the question is, from the different countries, what do we know about each of the countries? And therefore, what can we say this is the key unique selling point or proposition for this particular product in that country or from a particular business? Because even as we say, that, for example, I'm Kenyan, so buy Kenyan, build Kenyan. What is that product that Kenya will be known for across Africa? How do we build brands that speak beyond just our local and move into the regional and into the global? I also believe very strongly that through the ITC, the tools that are being availed need to be expanded a lot more for people to attain them, to be able to reach them. Some of the programs that are in place already, like the She Trades, etc., are doing a very good job online. However, we know very well that across Africa, a lot of the cross-border traders will not be able to participate in some of these programs. So in this time of COVID, what do we do using technology in different ways to communicate? For example, the use of little audio clips, the use of video, and to make sure that everybody, wherever they are, they can access these tools and can be able to expand their markets. I feel very strongly that women are a disadvantaged group because they're time poor. And so we need to take cognizance of the fact that older tools such as the radio should not be discarded simply because we have better tools. We should still work to reach as many people as possible and using even those older tools. I thank you and I hand over back to you. I'm sorry, you're muted, Sebastian.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Joanne, for your intervention. What I'm retaining actually from your intervention here is that businesses in Africa, as you mentioned, are not good at packaging and at marketing in general, marketing and branding in general. So there's a lot of focus that should go into that, and it should be based on data. No more guessing. When you go international, there's a lot of risks which are actually involved, and you must be prepared, better prepared than if you tackle actually the domestic market. There's also a very strong issue with respect to women. It's a strong opportunity for women to enter into this vast marketplace, but at the same time, they need also to be accompanied in those endeavors. We have the She Trade program that we are putting into place. And I really like your intervention in the sense that you are mentioning that the radio, for example, should not be discouraged. In Rwanda as well, this is the #1 medium that is used, and we must not only focus on Google ads and Facebook ads. There is some populations that listen to the radio quite extensively, and it should be used as a promotion mix. On top of online ads, we could have the radio, we could have the newspapers, and a mix of digital and analog communication tools. So thank you very much for your intervention, and I'd like to share the floor now with Steve Mishage from ITC.
Thank you, Sebastian. That was pretty informative. Thank you, Joanne. I really appreciate your contribution. I will keep mine brief because we are running out of time. What I can say is that for very many decades, Africa was known as the dark continent. Why? Because the outside world couldn't really have access to what was really going on in Africa and the good that Africa had to give the world. Now, with the coming in of new technologies, including GPS and digital mapping apps and applications on the internet, it has made it very easy for Africans basically to play that, to have their seat in the global world. Initially, the Western world was one step ahead of us because they had a well-developed address and postal kind of like a system in place. So basically, if you bought something online, it was easy to find the buyer and the seller. But that was not the case for Africa. But now in Africa, with the coming in of the mapping technology, better GPS-enabled phones, you can basically buy something online and the seller of the product can find you anywhere you are. So basically, the need for a well-developed postal address system is becoming more kind of outdated. But one challenge still remains: internet costs in Africa are still very high. Also, mobile phones that can access GPS services and link up also with the internet are still also not very accessible to the youth. So this is one place and one area which I believe our governments and should look at. That's all I have to say for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Again, a very good intervention with respect to the issue of addressing, which I talked about in the presentation. That is true that in the past there was a strong need actually to have an addressing system, kind of rigid one like in Europe or the US. But nowadays with GPS solutions, basically this need is not there anymore, because you can easily find where a person needs to be shipped its goods to, like using the solutions like what 3 words, for example. So so it's quite an easy one. True that in terms of infrastructure, there's still a long way to go with respect to the high cost of the internet in general, and there is negotiations, discussions to be had with mobile phone operators and internet operators in general, in order for everyone to find a win-win in this e-commerce endeavor. But as there will be more consumers, it is totally normal that prices of the internet connections will also drop. So there's a long way to go, yes, but at the same time, there's a big potential ahead. So thank you very much for your intervention. In terms of questions, I am not sure I don't know. First of all, is there any time to answer some questions? And then I don't see the questions, if there are any.
Yes, about 2 minutes.
Okay, so is there any questions? I'm not sure actually to know where to find the questions, if there are any.
In the Q&A.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. So the question from Faisal Ahmed is: the current biggest challenge is information sharing on the different requirements for different markets in Africa. How do we get a one-stop information center for private sector? This is a very, very big question. And okay, in ITC, we have some tools, but which act more at a macro level in terms of trade flows. So we have, for example, the biggest database in the world in terms of trade flows, which is called TradeMap. So you can go to trademap.org. We have some other solutions called export potential map as well, that determines the potential of a specific product category within a country. We have a one-stop shop as well with respect to market access requirements, and it's called MacMap, MACMAP.org. So these are kind of macro level type of information which are all centralized into ITC's website. Now, when it comes to the consumers, this is always a big issue. You'll find a lot of information about European markets and the US market in general, and many Asian markets in general. Data and information is quite well structured. When it comes to Africa, what we do when we go and implement this kind of projects, basically we have to go to the field. We have to know people. We have to get in touch with people in those target markets, trying to understand the consumer dynamics, the market dynamics in general, and the consumer preferences, etc., as we did actually in Rwanda. Information is yet not very well structured. However, you have some tools available from Google with respect to knowing the keywords that people search with high frequency that can help you also in Africa and in general. But I would say that the African market, in a way, you'd better actually have some people in those target markets in order to better understand how the markets actually work. I would say in general, within the AfCFTA agreement, I do tend to believe as e-commerce and as trade actually grows in this big market, that little by little we'll see actually more centralized data, more databases that are fed with data and information which will pertain to the continent and what the people preferences are, and this kind of things. But so far, I would rather recommend actually kind of a field approach. It's the only question that I have actually so far. So I think we can stop here, and I thank you very much for your attention. And I'll give the floor back to the moderator of this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastian. That was very important, and we enjoyed your contributions. Thank you, Joanne, also from Ghana. We really appreciate you staying with us for this long. I would still request that everyone who is online kindly stay with us. We still have 2 more sessions to go. Let me take this opportunity also to introduce the 3rd session, which is public-private dialogue, new partners in development. For this, we have the facilitator, Mr. Ruben Pulchand, who is the Chief Officer for Africa at the ITC, and Ms. Victoria Tomisto, who is the Program Officer also at ITC. We also have contributors, Ms. Rose Rono, who is the Director Trade, Trade Kenya. I hope you're all online. Mr. Ruben?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Victoria Tomisto speaking from ITC. If you allow, I will give a short presentation first, which will be followed by Mr. Ruben's contribution, as well as then our other speakers who would follow after that. So with that, I would share my screen. So just a moment, which I hope you're all able to see. If you could kindly confirm, Mr. Moderator.
We can see.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So indeed, I represent the Trade Facilitation and Policy for Business section at ITC, where our core focus is on supporting policymakers, trade support organizations, and the private sector, all to jointly design, implement, and monitor reforms on trade policy and trade facilitation in Africa and other regions as well. And my presentation today will pertain to PPDs, the new partners in development. And in particular, I wanted to take the angle of looking at PPD as a service, as a driver of the promise of the AfCFTA, both in terms of the negotiations process, but certainly on the implementation side and the benefits that that promises to the private sector. So as it has been clearly stated through the sessions prior to this one, is that the key beneficiary that we are aiming to serve with the AfCFTA is, of course, the businesses, the individuals that are employed, running the businesses. And we saw all the benefits that they can expect that have been projected and calculated and estimated for the benefit of businesses across the region. Now, in order to really harness this promise and ensure the success of the AfCFTA, we had established that the business inclusion perspective and public-private coordination really is at the heart of it. And throughout all the work that ITC does, we aim to ensure that private sector and certainly the SMEs and youth and women traders, informal traders are all represented in those key mechanisms and committees and ways in which public and private sector coordinate. So here as well, if we're working towards, the initial political project that the AfCFTA is, and aim to translate it into the commercial success, we need to ensure that there's inclusive representation and inclusion of business at all stages of the AfCFTA process. And there, the onus really is on both the government to coordinate, to raise awareness, to inform, to consult, and then translate those benefits through implementation to the business community, but also see the private sector, where possible, as a key source of information for the negotiations, positions, interests that the governments and negotiators are aiming to represent throughout the phases. And so the government certainly has the responsibility of coordinating. And what I would like to draw the attention to is the key essence and concrete translation of the AfCFTA's annexes and protocols that promise all these different reforms that we've been discussing today on tariffs, non-tariff barriers, trade facilitation, services, etc. And the key is that the earlier you engage business, the more you get their buy-in, their views, and the ownership of the process shared with the private sector, the better you're able to then implement the agreement, because you will design and execute those reforms from that business perspective. But also it enables you to see ways in which the private sector can be a co-implementer of the various reforms, which we will see in just a short while. And on the business side then, and we had heard from Mr. Mathuki, from Mrs. Cheruto, from KEPSA, and from EABC, the different ways in which, through the structures, through institutionalized mechanisms, already business is playing a role. And here the challenge really is the different levels, right, of business representation, and to make sure that from the SME, from a province in Kenya, their perspective feeds in all the way to the regional and continental private sector representation, one way or the other. And here it requires a lot of coordination between the national apex bodies, sectoral associations, umbrella organizations, to understand the benefits and challenges that are coming through, feed those into the regional advocacy organizations such as EABC, and then find those critical issues for furthering regional integration over to the continental private sector representation. And through this, we support the business at all of these stages to ensure that those key priorities and recommendations are joined, are presented in an inclusive, coordinated manner, and that they ultimately benefit the private sector at large through the different reforms that ensue from the AfCFTA implementation. Now, the AfCFTA does have mechanisms within it that propel business engagement and public-private dialogue. And I would just like to highlight two, which have been already alluded to by Mr. Magamuhunda, Mr. Mathuki, which are the importance of NTBs, right, that are covered under the Annex 5. And here, there are already existing mechanisms through which businesses can file complaints or at a national level, at a regional level, of understanding what are those key border-specific aspects, inefficiencies, discriminations that they face. But what AfCFTA does is builds a more robust system with another layer and through additional mechanisms to support the process and ensure that it works throughout, all the way from the national focal points and monitoring committees to then the REC level, intra-REC and inter-REC management of the issues that come from business complaints. But even more importantly, what I would raise here is the fact that, yes, NTBs can be at once solved on an ad hoc basis through the committee meetings and through the national focal points. But it is important that the recurring, persistent issues that have like deep root causes when it comes to certain cross-border inefficiencies, lack of coordination, customs cooperation, that those are addressed in a kind of sustained, institutionalized way, be it through the NTB committees, be it through the trade facilitation committees, where private sector is a constant presence in presenting those issues that have been investigated, that are presented in a joint coordinated manner, and that ensure that all the way from addressing the issue to the implementation of a reform and monitoring that it actually is being resolved in the long term is taking place at the party level, at the state level, as well as at the regional level. Now, another mechanism I would highlight here are the national and regional trade facilitation committees. And here we can highlight the Kenya National Trade Facilitation Committee, which is internationally recognized as a very, very highly effective committee in terms of coordinating, facilitating the implementation and monitoring the progress of trade facilitation agreement implementation, which is reflected in the AfCFTA as well. So these are the different ways through these committees that the government ministries, departments and agencies, private sector institutions, and civil society organizations come together in a committee that is co-chaired by the Department of Trade and KEPSA, with vice chair being the Revenue Authority, to jointly, through working groups and through regular meetings and set agenda, review the progress on trade facilitation issues. And the same is then reflected at the regional level. So we have in EAC and in the other regional communities in Africa established committees whereby the implementation is being coordinated and some of the reforms harmonized at the regional level. And here again, the regional business representatives are they're providing inputs that they are feeding through their national focal point associations to ensure that there is this regional representation of joint issues. Now, finally, I would like to then give some concrete examples and highlights in the ways of which PPD approaches have been taken to address issues that are at the heart of the AfCFTA. Some of the things I mentioned, like non-tariff barriers, trade facilitation issues. Here, in the first instance, I would like to highlight the work that has been done by EABC through different supporting organizations to consult and create awareness to private sector on, for example, last year on the draft tariff offers proposed on trading goods, and to jointly consult, strategize on engagements under trade and services negotiations. And so this two-day consultation brought then joint issues and recommendations to the table for EABC to take forward and to help them understand where are the needs and challenges and the ways in which resources and support mechanisms can be mobilized in order to fill those capacity gaps, help implementation of AfCFTA at EAC level. Another example that I would like to bring out is the way in which PPD has been used to address issues, tariff barriers, or non-tariff barriers rather, at a value chain level. So within the markup program implemented by ITC with EU support, we have worked with the Kenya Coffee Traders Association, KEPSA, and EABC in order to help the business organizations to investigate all the barriers from A to Z for a first-time exporter of coffee from Kenya to the target destination. And this mapping requires analysis of procedural, regulatory, trade policy issues, and really investigating the level of what are the root causes. Is it the lack of coordination at the agency level? Is it a lack of a policy that actually governs certain aspects of exporting between Kenya and EU? What are those issues and what are the root causes, and then proposed recommendations was the outcome of a 2-year kind of support cycle by which KCTA undertook with other sector actors meetings to establish what are the joint recommendations by the sector, engaged the public agencies, KEFIS, KRA, KEPS, and others at the Ministry of Agriculture, but issue by issue addressing the different barriers that had been identified, and then jointly discussing ways in which those reforms can be implemented and securing those commitments from the public agencies. And so this is a very kind of in-depth way of looking at a value chain, looking at all the different types of non-tariff barriers, and then issue by issue addressing them through these PPD mechanisms at the national level. And that will then be pulled together at a regional level with all partner states for then at a community level to address jointly some of the shared problems, specifically on trade facilitation, for example, or for coffee. Now, we also mentioned the importance of inclusivity. And here I would like to highlight the ways in which the issues for different traders, of course, vary. And certainly the SMEs, the micro entrepreneurs, the informal traders, women traders will have particular challenges that need to be identified and brought to the fore. And the way in which we aim to do that in COMESA, in 5 specific border crossings, is to ensure that the informal cross-border traders associations had kind of advocacy strategies that they could then build and secure and share through membership and participation in formal PPDs, such as the joint border committees that have been established.